For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th of August. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Patrick Christie's.
Tinderbox Britain. 6,000 police officers are on standby. Immigration lawyers boarding up their office windows. Dozens appear in court as the nation braces itself for what could be the biggest night of riots yet. Serious questions over the government's handling so far.
Yeah, serious questions indeed. Homes for criminals. Well, convicted criminals, including violent offenders and even terrorists, will no longer be banned from the social housing waiting list under Labour, apparently. This comes off the back of new plans to scatter asylum seekers all around the country, as Labour got its priorities wrong.
And left in the cold, Labour's decision to scrap universal winter fuel payments will mean millions of pensioners face higher bills from October, despite energy prices falling for every other household. Are pensioners being punished to fund public sector pay rises?
Now, I'm sure plenty of you will have views on that. And Olympic gender boxing rows. The Algerian boxer, Imane Khalif, sails through to the Olympics final, a story that will shock absolutely nobody. How would you feel if he or she wins a gold medal?
And we are going to show you a clip from the Met Police Commissioner, Mark Rowley. He was asked to address accusations of two-tier policing. He said, absolute nonsense. And in fact, these allegations, these accusations are actually putting police officers at risk. That's what he's saying. We'll show you the clip in just a moment.
Yeah, we will. And we're also going to show you another clip of another police officer who appears to actually confirm that there is two-tier policing. So we're talking about that, and I think it's reasonable to ask whether or not Yvette Cooper, our new Home Secretary, has lost control of this. Is she actually doing everything that needs to be done? Because we've got another clip of you which appears to show that she's not actually been communicating that well with certain police chiefs, and that, of course, comes off the back of a couple of absolutely bonkers policies when it comes to things like scattering asylum seekers around the country and criminals being allowed on that social housing waiting list. So I think our overall question today, when you kind of bubble all that together, is going to be for you. Do you trust Labour to deal with this situation that we've got at the moment? We want to hear from you on that. We want to know your views, because there's a lot to go out there. So let's hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. We're going to be reading out lots of your messages in the show, so please do get in touch. But first, let's get the news with Sam Francis.
Patrick, Emily, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to you. Just after 2 o'clock, and the top story this lunchtime, a coroner has paid tribute to the victims of what she's described as the truly tragic events in Southport as she opened an inquest today into the deaths of 3 girls. Bebe King, Alice Da Silva Aguirre and Elsie Dot Stankham were killed after an attack at a dance class over a week ago. The hearing was adjourned until criminal proceedings are complete. Meanwhile, police are bracing for more planned riots across the country, with at least 30 anti-immigrant rallies expected later. A list of immigration law firms has been reportedly shared online in chat groups as possible targets for gatherings, with a message inviting people to mask up and to attend. However, police are urging people to ignore the list of locations, telling rioters that officers will be waiting for them. Speaking after another emergency Cobra meeting last night, Sir Keir Starmer warned those involved in violence will be dealt with within, he says, a week of arrest.
I made it very clear on a number of occasions that those involved will feel the full force of the law. So we coordinated, we went through some of the numbers. Over 400 people now have been arrested, 100 have been charged, some in relation to online activity, and a number of them are already in court. And I'm now expecting substantive sentencing before the end of this week.
Sir Keir Starmer there. Well, however, the former Home Secretary Priti Patel has said that she believes Labour's government need to be more accountable.
This is why we have to have the questions, the scrutiny to the Home Secretary and to Keir Starmer, because actually the police need to have the tools, the equipment, the backing to police in the right way across all protests. Doesn't matter who, but literally all the protests where we're seeing thuggery, violence, criminality. Everyone that's involved in that, these protests should be policed. I've seen footage on television, I'm sure you have as well. I saw some on social media last night from one part of the country where I saw no police. I want to know why that was. Why was there no police presence?
Priti Patel there speaking to our very own Patrick Christie's last night. Well, those riots were sparked by misinformation online following last week's Southport stabbings. And Shadow Minister for Crime and Policing Matt Vickers told us this morning he thinks online criminality should be taken just as seriously as offline.
Social media operators have to take responsibility for some of the things that are going on. Do you know what? If you allow people to spread misinformation on the scale it's being spread, that has real consequences. We saw the online safety bill come forward. One of the problems with social media is that it moves so fast. Technology moves so fast. But we saw the online safety bill come forward, creating that precedent that these operators will be held to account for what goes on. They do have a responsibility to make sure that misinformation's controlled, is prevented.
Turning to the US, and Kamala Harris says Tim Walz is the vice president America deserves after officially unveiling him as her running mate at a campaign rally last night. The Democratic presidential nominee says she chose the Minnesota governor because he's a fighter for the middle class and called him a patriot. The former teacher is considered a more progressive choice. Back here at home, Fujitsu's holding its first ever meeting with a group of post office sub-postmasters this morning. Hundreds of branch managers were wrongly convicted of fraud because of faults in its Horizon IT system. The Japanese company's now under pressure to pay them compensation. And a software provider has been provisionally fined just over £6 million for a ransomware attack that disrupted NHS services in 2022. The Information Commissioner's Office found that Advanced Computer Software Group failed to implement measures to protect the personal information of almost 83,000 people. That attack led to the disruption of critical services, with data taken including phone numbers and medical records. The government is being urged to consider banning a popular material used to make kitchen worktops. That's after a reported rise in an incurable disease linked with the manufacture of artificial stone. The first UK case of silicosis linked to the cutting of the material was identified last year, with medics saying they have now seen a rise in cases. And finally, if you've noticed a dip in your mood between the hours of 4 and 8 o'clock, well, clearly you haven't been watching GB News. No, you're not alone. New research suggests we're most in need of a happiness boost in late afternoon. Nearly a third of people responding to a survey agreed it's the time of day they struggle with most, with our moods dropping to the lowest level of the day. But more than 2/5 said laughing with friends and family helps give them a lift. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm off to find some family and friends to cheer me up. See you soon.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is 8 minutes past 12, and it's a big day, isn't it? And quite possibly going to be a very big night as well. 6,000 police officers are on standby as the nation braces itself for more than 30 protests and counter-protests today. This comes as more than 400 people have been arrested so far, and the Met Police has vowed to use every power, tactic and tool to protect the country.
And this morning, as we were talking about, Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley addressed accusations of two-tier policing.
It's complete nonsense. We have commentators from either end of the political spectrum who like to throw accusations of bias at the police because we stand in the middle, we operate independently under the law without fear or favour.
Well, that'll get you going, won't it? So get in touch on that. But earlier, former Labour MP Khalid Mahmood blamed the Tories' lack of interest in the police force for the difficulties.
It's of course very, very difficult when you have this sort of violence across most of the country and you try to control it. Resources are limited, as we all know, because the previous government hadn't not invested into the police, and we've got serious problems in trying to resolve this. There has been a huge agenda to basically manipulate against the immigrants that have come through. There is legal migration, which is our responsibility because we allow that to happen. And then there's the people who come through illegally. So we have to address both of those.
Well, there's lots going on here, isn't there? There's lots going on. Obviously, we hope that there is no violence or disorder this evening. All the noises suggest that the police are certainly braced for it. Big question marks over whether or not Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer are doing enough to tackle this. We'll talk about all of that. Huge question marks of whether or not Mark Rowley has any right at all to say that there isn't two-tier policing, certainly given some of the things that we have actually potentially seen with our own eyes. But joining us now is retired Scotland Yard detective Mike Neville. Mike, thank you very much. Let's just deal with the first things first. Then. Is Mark Rowley right when he says that it's nonsense there's two-tier policing?
I'm afraid he's not, in the sense that it is defined the evidence of our own eyes. So there's several pieces of evidence about this. So let's look how the police manage BLM, Extinction Rebellion, or Just Stop Oil marches against those by anti-vaxxers or Tommy Robinson supporters. There's clear evidence there. We also see things like just recently an officer in Staffordshire advising people outside a mosque to leave their weapons behind. I don't imagine that would be the advice if they were the alleged right-wing thugs. And the clearest evidence is this, is that at the end of the month is Notting Hill Carnival. Now, at Notting Hill Carnival, there'll be people allowed to smoke drugs openly, they'll abuse the police, they'll be twerking, dancing with female officers, which in the past has been described as sexual assault. And what I challenge somebody, if you don't believe there's two-tier policing, do any of those things on the way to a Millwall football match as you march through the ground, because the police will treat you far differently at that point than if you're at the Notting Hill Carnival. So there is different policing styles. Sometimes that's justifiable when you're dealing with large numbers or whatever, or you arrest people later. But people are seeing this now, and it really is bad for British policing, because British policing was seen as the most fairest in the world, a real model for policing. And I just think we're losing that, and it's a really sad thing.
Mike, of course, the government is saying the same thing, that claims of two-tier policing are absolute nonsense, and Mark Rowley went as far as to say that this actually endangers police officers, these types of accusations. Could you not argue, Mike, though, that the police have to do risk assessments? There aren't unlimited resources. So rather than two-tier, it may just be that the risk assessments that they did suggested that perhaps there didn't need to be such a tough response. I mean, is that fair to say, Mike?
Not fair when you're thinking of how the disruption, for example, that Just Stop Oil or Extinction Rebellion we're creating across the country. And really, I think this doesn't come from the police, it comes from the top. We really have two-tier government or two-tier establishment. Because in the past, when we've had the Brixton riots and other disturbances, rightfully at the end of it, there's been some inquiry. What is the background to this? What can we do to stop this happening again? Are there any reasons why this occurred? In this essence, because it's working-class white people, they've just been denounced as far-right thugs. Now, some of them may well be far-right thugs, but the vast majority of the people involved are from traditional Labour-supporting areas who have no voice, really, who are not very articulate. And whilst I condemn any form of violence towards the police or any other person, sometimes you've got to listen and say, why is this happening? Because if we don't sort it out, this enormous boil will continue to grow. And of course, it does put police in danger, because it's never the politicians who have to face the bricks and sticks and whatever have been thrown.
For some communities in this country, there has been a huge amount of fear. I mean, the targeting of mosques, for example, the, looking to see if you can find someone who's of an ethnic minority. We've seen that too. We've seen racism on the streets of Britain. I mean, how should the police be reacting to this type of thing?
Police should be even-handed, because we've seen both white thugs are targeting ethnic minorities, and then we've seen Pakistani origin men targeting white people. Is the footage that you're showing where a man was brutally assaulted outside a pub. We can't have either of these things going on. It's not sort of, we don't need a competition as to who's the biggest victim. We need to stop all this violence and treat everybody with an even hand. And
Mike, if you don't mind, if you don't mind just cutting in, because I want to show you something. We can have a chat about that. I thought you made a very interesting point, by the way, there about the idea that we do have people torturing migrant hotels. We do have people walking around, or a person walking around with a swastika tattoo. All of that stuff's horrific and wrong. But there's also just millions and millions of other people who've got legitimate concerns, right? And to throw a big net over everyone and say, you're all far right if you've got a problem with that, I think that's, well, I think it's wrong. And I think, unfortunately, that is what we're seeing. But the idea of there not being two-tier policing, so that's the line that's come out today, all right? Mark Rowley, our top cop, parroting what our Prime Minister is saying. There's no such thing as two-tier policing. It's nonsense. I'm going to play you this clip now. I'm sure you've already seen it, but we'll do it again. Listen to what Superintendent Emmeline Richards said after the shocking scenes in Birmingham.
We knew that there was going to be a large amount of people out on that counter-protest. We knew who the vast majority of those people were. We'd had conversations in terms of what that was likely to look like, and so our policing response was commensurate to that intelligence and the information that we'd held with our partners and communities prior to that event taking place.
Look, maybe I've misheard him, Mike. I hope I have. But are we seriously in a situation now where a police officer decides to go and have a conversation with unelected community leaders and elders about what they're planning on doing, mobbing up on a roundabout, some of them carrying weapons? I'm sorry, does anyone have the privilege of talking to a police officer and saying, oh, I'm going to go on that roundabout, I might bring a few lads with me, I might bring a few weapons, and I'll razz it round on a motorbike?
We'll police ourselves.
But we'll police ourselves, Gaffer. Is that all right? What is that, Mike?
It is outrageous. I mean, it sounds like an AI chatbot speaking, doesn't it? And the further people get up in the police, unfortunately, the more they sound like some kind of machine spouting these things. And the fact that Tommy Robinson had turned up and said, look, I'm going to bring a few blokes and a couple might be armed, it wouldn't work. And there's also the issue in Staffordshire where somebody was, a police liaison officer was told, it was telling people, do leave your weapons behind in the mosque if you've got any. It is completely unacceptable. The police have got to go back to policing without fear or favour. And that means by act, not words, saying these things and then not doing them. And it's fascinating that that Palestinian flag has become much more than anything to do with Palestine. It's sending a real bad message, and we're all already forgetting about the Jewish community and how they must feel about the threat of all this.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. That's Mike Neville there, who's a former police officer. Just as a little bit of a throw ahead to something, we'll give you more detail on this as we get it, but we are hearing reports now about some sentencing coming through for people who were involved in some of the disruption in the Southport area. So as we get more information on that, we'll bring that to you. But, of course, it's not just a policing issue, this, far from it. It's political as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So let's cross over to Adam Cherry, our reporter who joins us now. Adam, a huge headache for the government, a new government. The honeymoon is very much over, perhaps before it even begun, Adam. But Yvette Cooper, there have been huge questions, and I don't know if we can show you a quick clip that was on a radio station a day or two ago, which really pointed out that Yvette Cooper may not have been all on top of this as she might have should have been. Let's watch it.
Why did South Yorkshire Police senior officers not put an exclusion zone around that hotel, which, as you will be aware as Home Secretary, that is normal standard operating police procedure? Why was that not? When you asked the Chief Constable, how did she reply?
As you know, Nick...
So you've not asked her, have you, Home Secretary?
So Yvette Cooper, our Home Secretary, clearly struggling to answer the question of whether she spoke to chief constables who knew that this hotel was going to be targeted, one of these migrant hotels was going to be targeted. Doesn't appear as though she had the conversations that she should have been having, Adam. There's a lot of concerns that perhaps, you know, now we're seeing the ramping up of police now, but perhaps a little too late, Adam.
Well, yes, Emily, that's the argument, isn't it? Is the government were expecting an easy first month or two in this honeymoon period post-election, perhaps go on holiday, it's parliamentary recess, everything will be relatively straightforward until we tackle financial questions in the autumn. Actually, what's happened is everything's unravelled very quickly and they've been caught off guard. They're no longer in opposition and they can't get away with blaming someone else. The pothole is now their problem. The riot is now their problem. There have been cabinet meetings and Cobra meetings over the last couple of days, but to your point, Emily, is this a little bit too little, too late? Nonetheless, 400 arrests, but we are expecting at least 30 more protests tonight, some in the capital, and it is just an open question of whether, if they had been better prepared earlier, could this have been stopped? And that's not even before you get to the longer term questions that you may need to deal with here. At the moment, we're obviously concerned with the fact that migrant hotels are being burnt and things are being thrown through windows, but there will need to be a longer-term diagnosis of this, I think, which will be a sobering conversation.
Yeah, and Adam as well, massive calls to recall Parliament, and that is a big way of a Home Secretary and a Prime Minister being held to account. The other aspect to this, and we cannot ignore this, by the way, is that we currently do not have an opposition in this country. We do not have an opposition. You know, Rishi Sunak is wherever he is, I don't know. It is the recess, fine, I get that. But that just means now that we have Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, a bit of Mark Rowley, and then, you know, Elon Musk is essentially the leader of the opposition in this country at the moment on Twitter, or X, isn't he really? You know, are there questions about whether or not Parliament should be recalled, about whether or not Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer are trying to avoid some scrutiny on this?
Yeah, the calls to recall Parliament are really coming from the Tory leadership contenders. Now, that is where the real opposition is coming from for this. Downing Street's position on that has been that actually the police and the executive have all the powers that they require to respond to this. It's a political choice whether you recall Parliament. It makes no difference to how the riots are handled tonight or tomorrow. That's a different point entirely. If you do recall Parliament, as the likes of Priti Patel and Nigel Farage have called for, then, yeah, you can hold them to account, and the green benches, everyone can stand up and say, why aren't you responding to this this riot or protest in the same way as that one? And that would be a tricky conversation for them to navigate. Perhaps that's why they're not doing it. Also on Rishi Sunak, yeah, we haven't seen him. Who knows where he is? But you are seeing it from, like, as I said, Priti Patel, and also Robert Jenrick, who yesterday put out quite a punchy video on the sectarian violence and the far-right violence and calling out both. So there is some pushback, but I would suggest that viewers think not enough.
All right, Adam, look, thank you very, very much. I know that you're going to be incredibly busy today. This is an issue that is directly interwoven between politics and policing and societal issues as well. Adam Cherry, thank you very much. We are going to cross live now to Liverpool Crown Court. The 3 men have just been sentenced. Let's listen
for offenders involved in the widespread and unacceptable disorder we saw in Southport and Liverpool last week. Drummond, Riley and Gearon's actions would have caused panic, revulsion and chaos in their local communities. The 3 men sentenced today are the tip of the iceberg and just the start of what will be a very painful process for many who foolishly chose to involve themselves in violent unrest. Many of those involved will be sent to prison for a long time. The disturbing images we've seen across the country, manipulated by agitators both in person and online, while local families still grieve the loved ones, is an unforgivable and selfish act that each and every person sentenced today will have to live with. Violence, rioting and aggression will never be tolerated in this country, and we stand ready to use the full force of the law against any others who have been or are considering joining these intolerable scenes. The Crown Prosecution's message is clear. Whatever your motivation for targeting police, inciting hatred or wreaking havoc on your community, you'll be swiftly punished. Riley, Drummond and Gearon mistakenly thought they would escape justice. They now face an extended period of time behind bars, and their criminal convictions will stay with them forever. There are hundreds of prosecutors working flat out across the country, making real-time charging decisions and helping put offenders before the courts. We will continue to work side by side with our police partners to ensure that the criminal justice system responds to any and all incidents of disorder as swiftly as possible. Let today's result serve as a warning to all those who carry out criminality on our streets. You will always suffer the consequences. Thank you.
Well, there we go, Liverpool Crown Court. 3 men have now been sentenced for their part in the disorder in Southport.
Yeah. I'll just give you some of the sentences here. There's one individual who has been jailed for 20 months, so is admitted violent disorder and a racially aggravated public order offence in Liverpool city centre on Saturday night. There's another individual who was sentenced to 3 years, and he pleaded guilty to violent disorder and the assault of an emergency worker, in Southport last Tuesday. He was among a group of around 300 people there. There's also another individual here who's been sentenced to 2.5 years. He was caught on CCTV using an implement to set a police van on fire, and he was found with 3 lighters when arrested. So there's the sentences for you, a combination of 3 years, 2.5 years and 20 months. And those people have all been sentenced, look, roughly speaking, within a week of them committing those crimes, which is what Keir Starmer said was going to happen. People are going to be brought to book and sentenced for long times within about a week of you committing that crime. So it does set a marker out for people who might be thinking about going out on the streets tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the Prime Minister and Yvette Cooper and the country will be hoping that these sentences, very quick, this has happened, will, tell people not to come out on the streets this evening and not to involve yourself in this. You're going to be found. You're going to be put in jail as a result. I wonder what you make of these sentences. Are these long enough to dissuade people from taking part in these violent protests?
I'll tell you what's going to happen. This is going to be rightly or wrongly done. It always happens, by the way, and it's not just in situations like this. It's whenever anyone of note or a big flare-up happens and there is a sentencing that happens after it. People naturally compare it to other sentences for other crimes, OK? So you see people who, might be found guilty of manslaughter and they're given, 18 months or something like that, or, serious sexual offences, for example, and they're given a similar sentence there, compared to, say, 3 years for this. It is very difficult, and it's a very, very risky business to start doing that and comparing and contrasting different sentences for different crimes. I can understand why people do it. There is a context here, isn't there, that the government, especially, and the police force, no doubt, are absolutely vitally keen to try to stop people going out and to try to nip these things in the bud. you know, whether or not you think those sentences fit those crimes. Many people will. Many people might think, well, if you're going to sentence someone for 3 years for being, you know, racially aggressive and doing all of this stuff, marching towards a mosque, for example, in Merseyside, chanting about how this is our country, etc., which one of these individuals did, you know, then maybe we should also be sentencing people for longer for other offences as well. Let me know your thoughts.
But this is about sending a message, isn't it? We've got a planned protest, perhaps 30 more protests tonight. It is clear, now the government may have had their failings so far, but it is clear they want to put a lid on this. And how do they think they can do that? By setting an example, by making a powerful message that actually, if you are out at one of these things, if you're causing disruption, if you're being... if you're conducting yourself in a racially hatred way, that's not the right way to put it, but you know what I mean. If you are being aggravated on the streets of this country, then you don't do it. You don't do it. You're going to be banged up.
Yeah, there's an urgency, isn't there? And again, though, that Labour will have questions to answer about, you know, this comes terrible timing for them. It comes off the back, doesn't it, of them looking to clear out certain prison cells as well and release some offenders early. So, yeah, they've got themselves into a bit of a mess here. But let's not forget, though, how this all started. So later on this morning, earlier on this morning, there were inquests into the deaths of BB King, who was 6, Elsie Dot Stancombe, who was 7, and Alice De Silva Aguirre, who was 9. And they died last Monday in the Southport stabbing attacks.
Yes, our reporter, Jack Carson, was there today.
Senior Coroner Julie Golding described the 3 young girls as full of life and energy and said they'd be missed beyond any description that she said her woefully inadequate words may attempt to describe. This was a very short proceeding here at the Coroner's Court this morning due to the fact that there is still a criminal investigation in place and underway. So very much an open and adjournment and suspension of the coronial investigation in order of the words of the senior coroner, so that that criminal investigation could be unfettered, of course, in its proceedings. But we did get brief details on the tragic deaths of Alice, Bibi and Elsie. Of course, Alice, we found out, died at 1:20 in the morning at Alderhay Children's Hospital. She was verified as dead by her father, and Elsie was verified as dead at 13:53 at the dance studio. For Bibi, she was identified by parts of her clothing and also a recent photograph. She was identified further up the street from the dance studio just after 1 p.m. on the 29th of July. So that was very much the proceedings here today. But of course, we know and have seen the outpouring of grief from this tragic incident. We heard at the court the 26 children attended the dance studio for that organised dance class, and we heard that it was between 11:40 and 11:50 that an attacker came in and started allegedly attacking those present. Axel Ruda Cabana was the person that was detained at the scene and is charged with the murders of the 3 children. That court proceeding involving him is later this year. This court proceeding at the coroner's office is suspended until after that criminal investigation. But we've been here during the week. We've seen how raw the grief still is at these tragic incidents. Just yesterday, there was another vigil, this dedicated to Alice, and a celebration of life for the 9-year-old, attended by members of her friends and family. Her funeral takes place on the 11th of August, that's this Sunday. That very much was the other parts of the coroner's proceedings today, to officially be able to register the death certificates and release the body into the custody, of course, of the family and the friends for those proceedings to take place. And we know how much of an impact these, of course, events have had. In a statement, Bibi's family said that no words could describe the devastation that has hit them as they tried to deal with the loss of their little girl. They and Alice's family said to keep smiling and dancing like you love to do, our princess. They said, you were always our princess. Nothing will change that. Vigils will continue to be held by this family, by these friends, by this community over the coming weeks as they come to terms with this tragic event.
That's Jack Carson there reporting for us. Look, we've still got a lot to come, and there are some other stories doing the rounds. It's not just about the predicted violent disorder that we're going to be seeing on the streets tonight, of course. There are a couple of stories that I think have slipped under the radar, including two relatively bonkers plans. I think one of them is Operation Scatter, which is to scatter asylum seekers all around the country in a variety of different social housing and accommodation blocks. Another story that we're going to be talking about as well is whether or not Labour really are going to allow violent criminals and terrorists to get on that housing waiting list, that social housing waiting list. Raises serious questions, doesn't it, as to whether or not Labour have got their priorities right.
Yes, and don't forget also, Labour's decision to scrap universal winter fuel payments could leave millions of pensioners facing much higher bills from October, and that's despite energy prices falling for every other household. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 12:30, and a recap then of the news we've heard in the last half hour or so, that 3 rioters have been jailed for violent disorder following nationwide protests after their sentencing was fast-tracked today. Liam James Riley, Declan Gearan and Derek Drummond were sentenced this afternoon at Liverpool Crown Court. 58-year-old Derek Drummond is the first person to be sentenced for violent disorder in Southport, linked to, of course, that fatal knife attack on Monday of last week. Riley will spend 20 months behind bars for being involved in Liverpool city centre riots, while Gearan admitted to arson, and he has been sentenced to 30 months in prison. Meanwhile, more than 6,000 specialist police officers have been mobilised today to respond to as many as 30 far-right protests planned across the UK later. In other news, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has dismissed accusations of two-tier policing. He says that's complete nonsense, saying the comments endanger officers' lives. Sir Mark stated, "We operate independently under the law without fear or favour," addressing claims that some protests are policed more harshly than others. That criticism came from figures including Nigel Farage and Elon Musk, who argued last week's disorder was handled more severely than it would have been if it had involved ethnic minorities. And a coroner has paid tribute today to the victims of what she has described as the truly tragic events in Southport, as she opened an inquest into the 3 deaths of girls. Bebe King, Alice Da Silva Aguirre and Elsie Dot Stankham were killed after an attack at a dance class in Southport a week ago. The hearing was adjourned until criminal proceedings are complete. Well, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is insisting that communities will be kept safe, even if more protests take place. He's also warning those involved in rioting could have sentences handed down within just a week of being arrested. As we've seen already today, sentencing is being fast-tracked. More than 400 people have already been detained across England and Northern Ireland so far, according to police sources, with that number expected to rise. In other news, a software firm has been told it faces a £6 million fine for failing to prevent a cyber attack that disrupted NHS services. The data watchdog says the Advanced Computer Software Group didn't protect personal information of more than 80,000 people, which was held to ransom in 2022. Fujitsu is holding its first ever meeting with a group of post office sub-postmasters today. Hundreds of branch managers were wrongly convicted of fraud because of faults in Fujitsu's Horizon IT system. And the Japanese company is now under pressure to pay them compensation. And finally, Team GB are hoping for more medal success later after adding 4 to their collection at the Paris Games last night. Josh Kerr won silver in the 1,500 metres, and there was also a few podium finishes, one in track cycling, skateboarding and another in the boxing. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sam Francis. Another update just after 1 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:36. Welcome back.
Yes, indeed. All right, OK, so there's going to be a huge amount of focus today and no doubt into the evening on this potential for disorder. But we did want to bring you a couple of other stories that really do matter, especially to huge numbers of our viewers, actually. Millions of pensioners will face higher energy bills from October. And this comes after Labour's decision to scrap universal winter fuel payments this year.
However, while pensioners face an increase of about 15%, everyone else is going to see their energy bills fall under the price cap. So, joining us now to discuss this is pension expert, the Lancat, Tom McPhail. Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Just how many pensioners are going to be impacted by this, then?
This is going to... The government's plans are that it will affect millions of pensioners. So the vast majority of pensioners currently receive the winter fuel payment. If they cut it back so that only those claiming pension credit are eligible, it will drop, I think, from around 10 million to around 2 million pensioners. So very substantial drop in the number of people who get the government help on their fuel payments. And in addition, there are worries that many people who should be eligible for these payments won't get them because they are eligible for the pension credit, which is the determining mark for this, and a lot of people who are eligible don't claim the pension credit. So the government's going to deny many people who should be getting the winter fuel payment, even by their own new standards, that payment.
Just to clarify then, really, I mean, arguably, these are the people who are most in need, aren't they, of the winter fuel help? I mean, they aren't still at work. They can't go out and maybe take up a second job or try to get that pay rise from their boss or something along those lines. These are the people that really need it. Does it not seem slightly bizarre that Labour would go after that demographic?
I think a lot of people are going to be worried about this. We know that so they've said if you get the pension credit, you'll be eligible for the winter fuel payments, and they say that means, you know, if you get pension credit, you're close to poverty in retirement, and so you deserve the extra help the government's giving. But as we've already discussed, a lot of people who should be getting pension credit don't get it, and in addition, over half of pensioners are reliant on the state pension for at least half of their retirement income. So even if you don't get the pension credit, it doesn't mean you're wealthy in retirement. A lot of pensioners, I mean, some pensioners have done very well in life, but many haven't. And I think the worry is that putting the bar at such a high level, you know, just the pension credits marker means that many pensioners who are not wealthy will still struggle in retirement.
Yeah, because, Tom, there is this narrative that's been growing that all pensioners are living it up. They've got their mansions, they've benefited from the increased prices on their assets, and, you know, they're living pretty. They're living pretty. But that's not the case, is it, Tom? Yes, there are some people who have big houses, mortgage-free, but a lot of people are struggling.
So, and this is the problem, there is a grain of truth in that argument, and the triple lock has done a great deal of good in improving pensioners' standard of living over the last 10 years. So that's good. So pensioners are better off today than they were on average 10 or 15 years ago. Doesn't mean they're wealthy, though, and whilst there is a minority of pensioners who have done well in life, many haven't, and I think particularly older women who very often end up outliving their partner. So think about women living on their own in their 80s. Very often they are very far from wealthy, and they are very much dependent on state support to keep them safe in later life. And I think there's a worry that pension credit isn't being paid out to people who should get it, and so this measure is just going to make the situation worse for millions of pensioners.
It's a question of fairness as well, which I'm sure, you know, is another point that needs to be addressed here. It's a question of fairness for people who've paid in all their lives, gone to work all their lives, done their bit all their lives, paid their taxes, all of that stuff, and then in their retirement, maybe when they actually do need to, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, they need to put their hand out a little bit, that maybe they're now the group of people who could not be getting anything in return. But look, Tom, thank you very much for joining us and talking about this. This is Tom McPhail there, who's a pension expert at the Lancat. And can I also just say this is... I think it ties in a bit with the story that we're going to talk about now, OK? Because if you've got a group of people there who've maybe lived in Britain for decades and decades and decades and done everything by the book and done everything right and paid into the state and all of that stuff, and now there's no money for them. Well, it's interesting because, according to reports, Labour is planning to stop using large military sites for housing asylum seekers and is instead going to disperse them across the country to ease local service pressures.
Yes, apparently the government has agreed with councils on how many asylum seekers each area will take, so they're moving away from, you know, the former RAF sites like Wethersfield and Scampton, and instead they're planning on using empty homes or former student blocks that have self-catering facilities, and also buying up that sort of lower end of the rental market, social housing too. So this is there's quite a lot of complexity to this one.
Yeah, massive problem. And you have a right to ask, well, where are certain people going to live? Where are people in certain areas? There's not a huge amount of housing stock, and maybe you've got kids or grandkids and they're coming into the rental market. Where are they going to live? But anyway, joining us now to discuss this is the former Parliamentary Private Secretary to Boris Johnson. It's Alex Stafford. Look, Alex, thank you very, very much. I can't help but wonder whether or not this is a demonstration of some priorities being a bit wrong here. I mean, scattering certain asylum seekers across the country and using what little housing stock is available at the taxpayers' expense, by the way. I mean, what do you make of this?
Well, this is an absolute disgrace. We all know every single council is facing huge pressures on the housing ladder, on social housing, on the rental market, rents through the roof. We know that. All this is going to do is flood the country with tens of thousands of people who are going to be put on social housing, push up rents, and that's going to make everyone who wants a social home, everyone who wants to rent a home, their life that much harder, make the costs go up, make it harder to get in. I think this is an absolutely bonkers scheme, but they should be put in the disused army bases, the places they were before, and that actually would keep the rents down. This flooding the market with tens of thousands of extra people. It's crazy, and sends the wrong message to people that actually you work hard, you save, you pay the system over decades, you will be ignored, but you come over on a boat a couple of weeks ago, you'll get a social house.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, I'm sure a lot of people will agree with you, but the problem is, isn't it, that people aren't happy with barges being used, people aren't happy with RAF bases being used, people certainly aren't happy with hotels being used at, reportedly £8 million a day or whatever it is now. So the question is, where are these people going to go? I mean, the Conservatives, they weren't very good at stopping the boats from coming across, were they?
Well, I agree with you that we should be in the hotels, but I disagree. I think most people I speak to say actually they should be in disused army bases. They should be in that sort of accommodation. It's only a very small number of people who don't maybe have to fight to get on the social housing ladder actually want them out of it. I think most people want them in disused army bases. Now, look, my grandfather came here after the Second World War as a refugee. And you know what? He lived in a disused army base for years and years and years when my mother was born. If it's good enough for my grandfather, who came over, who fought for Britain, who fought against the Nazis, why is it not good enough to use in this day and age?
Yeah, and look, Alex, there's a combination of different factors going on here, OK? So you're going to have, conceivably, people in quite dispersed communities where there's maybe not a lot of social housing, maybe a quite, let's say, traditionally rural British community, for example, that are going to find themselves with housing stock being taken up, potentially cultural changes. Now, some people won't mind about that. Some people obviously won't mind about that at all, and fair enough, OK? But they'll see the area potentially change. And you've got the coupling of that, I think, with people who have got concerns about that currently being labelled as far right, Alex. And I just think this is so tone deaf at the moment if Labour plough ahead with this.
And it's crazy. Labour stood on a manifesto of smashing the gangs. We have seen no evidence of them smashing the gangs to stop the illegal immigration. All we've seen is actually getting more illegal immigrants out of disused army bases into the community. So rather than smashing the gangs, they're trying to smash the social housing market. It's crazy and completely disingenuous to people who did vote for Labour, who actually wanted to end this mass illegal immigration.
And just very quickly, Alex, just another one from Labour. So the Conservatives, apparently they had a plan to ban convicted criminals, including violent criminals and even terrorists, from accessing social housing, from being put on those lists. Apparently Labour are going to completely backtrack on that and go against that. So they're dropping these plans. So potentially it could be that now criminals will be on social housing lists. I mean, that's another thing that's going to sound a little tone deaf.
I mean, it's crazy. You're going to have illegal immigrants pushing up the social housing list and the private rental market. You have criminals, terrorists. Who wants to live next to a terrorist or convicted murderer or something? No one. This is so tone deaf, wrong, and really sums up, unfortunately, the type of a Britain that Keir Starmer wants us to have.
Well, look, Alex, thank you very much for joining us. Alex Stafford there is a former Parliamentary Private Secretary to Boris Johnson. We are going to get different views on this throughout the course of the show because there are some people who think this is a good idea. There are some people who think, well, these people are here. We're not able to either deport people who've come here illegally.
Oh,
if
yeah.
they are genuine asylum seekers, then they're going to have to live somewhere. And also, you can't keep, unfortunately, some may say, certain criminals in prison forever. So
There's
they're
a
going to have
question
to live
mark over
somewhere.
whether these people are people who have had their claims processed and had been accepted as refugees, or whether these are people who have come over on boats and are still in the system. That is something that we need to find out exactly who the people are who are going to be given this housing.
It's just interesting as well because what is as of today, what is the deterrent? You know, there's no Rwanda, all right, many people thought that was rubbish anyway, fine. But, you know, it now does appear to be easier to come to Britain and live, doesn't it? I don't know, what are your views? Let us know.
No, there doesn't seem to be a deterrent at the moment. Anyway, coming up, the Algerian boxer Imana Khalif sails through to the Olympics final. We're asking, how would you feel if she wins a gold medal? Let us know.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Roy Chadwick Way, that's the A523 in Adlington in Cheshire. That's shut between London Road and the A555 in Woodford at the scene of a collision causing queues. Now, Smethwick in the West Midlands struggling. Oldbury Road, the A457 still shut between Euroway Park and Spawn Lane South, and queuing on all approaches. A previous collision is being investigated. And big queues for the clockwise M25. Now, the entry slip coming on at Brentwood at 28 closed off. Severe delays. There's ongoing emergency repairs. Queues to 3 miles southbound back along the A12 Brentwood bypass and back around the roundabout onto the other slip roads. If you're heading toward Newquay and Cornwall, it's the Boardmasters Festival. Road closures in place, already looking quite busy on routes towards the festival. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Tom, dying to talk to you about this. Transport for London, right? They run the buses and tubes and things in London, and they've got £2.5 million. £2.5 million, which they're going to spend on what?
Diversity training. I dare say they've probably got plenty of it already.
But let me tell you something. I sit on a board of a company, and I was diversity trained recently.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, really?
And I must admit,
What was that like?
Well, I tell you, it was like stating the bleeding obvious.
Yeah.
Right? So you sit there and you say, well, why would I do that? Or why would I treat someone like that? I wouldn't do that in the first place. I don't need to be trained in this. And you just sat there for 6 hours while people told you the obvious. But what do you think of spending that amount of money for Transport for London?
It's crazy, because on the one hand, do we need this diversity training? The TfL is an incredibly diverse workforce already. The idea that there are barriers to entry there doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Also, as you say, these things are commonsensical, really. And to the point, sometimes they can become problematic, because they're not just saying, you know, be open and tolerant of people and so on. It's actually preaching a more kind of divisive sort of rhetoric to people, which can be a big problem in the
get your
workplace.
diversity training from your boss or somebody, don't you? Somebody pulls you up and says, you don't talk to people like that. This is how you talk to them. That's it. Done.
It should be that
Spend
simple.
6 hours in front of
And I know that in the grand scheme of things, £2.5 million is kind of money down the back of the sofa. But at the same time, my local tube station just closes early on random nights of the week because of the fact that they haven't got enough staff.
4 years ago, there were 655 people at City Hall earning over £100,000 a year. People might argue that's 655 too many. There are 1,100 now. 4 years later.
1,100?
Actually, 1,142 to be precise.
The People's Channel.
Right, it's 12:50, and of course we're going to turn to the Olympics. Algerian boxer Imana Khalif has successfully gone through to the women's boxing final. She'll fight against China's Yang Liu as the boxer reaches for that gold medal.
Well, the news comes after Khalif found themselves at the centre of a gender debate after them and fellow boxer Lin Yu Ting were banned from competing in last year's World Championships, but allowed to attend the Olympics. It's obviously worth noting that they were banned from competing because one boxing federation basically decided that they were men, right?
Yeah, at the World Championships,
Yeah.
the IBA said they failed a gender test. Anyway, joining us now is the Executive Director at Humans of Sport, Harshni Mitra. Thank you very much for joining us. This has been shrouded in so much controversy. This is a boxer, an athlete, who failed one gender test and is now competing at the Olympics in the final for boxing. Your thoughts?
There is no information about a gender test. There is no information about her medical records. It's quite clear that the IOC have allowed her to compete, both athletes to compete, and therefore they have a right to compete.
But Harshni, she was banned from the World Championships, was she not?
There was a statement that made it clear that the medical assessment wasn't complete. You cannot draw a conclusion from an incomplete medical assessment.
Is it not, with respect, relatively easy to tell if someone's got XY chromosomes, which I think they did?
There is no information that confirms that.
But they're saying, well, so you don't believe them? Is that what it is?
There is no information that confirms that. There's a lot of rumors and witch hunt ongoing. And I believe this is a news channel, and you rely on fact and you rely on information, and that's what I am talking
sorry
about.
about this, but I am relying on fact here, because the fact I have in front of me is what the International Boxing Association has said, and they said that they failed a gender eligibility test due to the presence of XY chromosomes. So with respect, you don't believe that? Is that what it is? Which is fine. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what you're saying, right? Is it that you just don't trust that?
You're picking up one single sentence from an entire statement and saying this. It is also important to see that the entire statement says that there was no testosterone level tests and there were no completion of any medical test. And the decision was taken by 2 people who are officials, not medical people. And we have seen how this IBA has conducted a recent press conference, which gives us clear information as to the fact that they really do not have information. And also, more importantly, they do not have respect for individual athletes.
Do you believe that there should be another test done here to make sure of the facts?
I believe that the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has taken the right decision to allow these women to compete. I believe that the IOC has looked into the matter and taken this decision, and I support the IOC for the fact that they are supporting these athletes and ensuring that sport is about respect, about dignity, and the athletes' rights and safeguarding is at the centre of it.
And fairness. Thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there, but really appreciate you coming on. Harshni Mitra, Executive Director at Humans of
Interesting
Sport.
if we can't believe the XY chromosomes or the women who said that they've been punched in the face by a man there. But anyway,
Well, stick with us. We're going to be heading back, of course. We're expecting 30 protests later this evening. Some saying now reports that there could be nearly 100. We'll bring you the latest. Good afternoon, Britain on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Quite a lot of cloud around today, but some sunny spells. A fair few showers, mostly in the west, and a cool breeze, and quite windy actually across northwestern areas. Thanks to this area of low pressure, bringing plenty of showers. Been a wet start to the day across western Scotland. The rain will be a bit more sporadic this afternoon, more on and off, and there will be some brighter spells, but plenty of showers packing in across Scotland, through northern England, Wales, and into the Midlands. Much of the east will stay dry, but we'll see a bit more cloud coming in here through the afternoon. Some sunny spells for Northern Ireland and Wales during the middle part of the afternoon. It's a cooler feel, particularly in the east. Temperatures close to average, actually. Low 20s across the south. In the high teens further north. And feeling cooler because of the gusty wind and the showers, which will continue to drift in on that gusty wind over the Highlands and the Western Isles well into this evening. The showers should ease across northeastern parts of Scotland, so some sunny spells here. And not too many showers to end the day for Northern Ireland and Northern England as well, so decent chance here that it will be quite dry. There's that cloudier zone working in through the day over the Midlands and eastern areas, and further south and west brightening up for a time, but here then later on more cloud will start to move in through the evening, and particularly overnight, bringing rain and drizzle by the time we get to tomorrow morning. Elsewhere, many places will become dry through the night. The winds will ease a little across northwest Scotland, but still quite a breezy night, and temperatures dropping down to 13 or 14 for England and Wales, 11 or 12 across central and northern Scotland. Tomorrow's going to be a pretty drab day for Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud, rain and drizzle, and that rain and drizzle will gradually spread into southern Scotland, eventually over northern England and eventually into the east as well, though again many places here will stay dry. Temperatures are generally still up into the 20s, feeling quite warm and quite humid though for much of tomorrow.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Esther, can we talk about Andy Murray? Because Andy Murray has retired, which is great news. And in the papers today, his lovely wife, Kim, said, this is good, I'm glad he's retired because he can do some childcare now and a bit of housework. But you know all about relationships. Yes. This is going to be an adjustment for them, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, as a father and a husband as well, Mark, that when you are at home, you are actually a big pain in the... Because you are kind of wired and you want to be doing stuff. And Andy Murray's like goal-driven. Can you imagine? He's going to be like, I'm going to make chili con carne. I'm going to make chili like this and this. And, you know, he's going to be like so focused and he's going to have so much energy. I would be terrified to live in the same house as Andy Murray. I know he kind of comes across as quite laid back, you know. He's a bit of a Sean Connery.
But actually, these people are driven, and that's not going to stop just because he's retired, right?
OK, when you've got a driven parent and the parent is at home, they're a nightmare. Yeah. So he needs to be seriously occupied. We've got to think of some hobbies.
Isn't it Kim's turn?
To have her career?
For her to be the most important person in the house.
I think she's quite into her art and painting and things like that.
So isn't it time for him to stay at home, you know, feed the kids and all that, empty the dishwasher, and let her career be the most important?
Although I doubt he'll do that. He'll have so much other stuff to do. Punditry. Maybe he'll join his mum. She has a tennis academy.
Actually, I remember there's a documentary about both of them have a hotel in Scotland. Actually, I think they co-run and I think they refurbished it. Yeah. To be fair, you know, Kim, you know, not just the hotel, but I'm sure she'll have other business ventures. You're right. I think it's the right thing to do. Clearly, you know, Andy Murray has had to be out the house. You know, probably she's had to look after the kids. I think anyone that's at the top of their game when they retire, I think the only fair thing to do is to, as you say, maybe take a step back and support your wife.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is 1 o'clock exactly, actually, on Wednesday, the 7th of August. I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Well, Tinderbox Britain. 6,000 police officers are now on standby as 3 men are jailed for their part in the Southport riots. The Crown Prosecution Service is saying it's just the tip of the iceberg. Well, the nation is bracing itself for what could be the biggest nights of riots yet.
And homes for criminals. Convicted criminals, including violent offenders and even terrorists, will no longer be banned from the social housing waiting list under Labour. This comes off the back of new plans to scatter asylum seekers around the country. Has Labour got its priorities wrong?
And left out in the cold. So Labour's decision to scrap universal winter fuel payments will mean that millions of pensioners face higher bills from October, despite energy prices falling for every other household. I think one of the big questions here is, are pensioners being punished to fund public sector pay rises?
And the Olympic gender boxing row. The Algerian boxer Mana Khalif sails through to the Olympics final. How would you feel if they win the gold medal?
And are too many people skiving off for the summer? It seems some are enjoying the nice weather a little bit more than others. One location in the country has come out as the top area for skivers. Can you guess which one it is? Yes, OK. Well, look, there's a heck of a lot to talk about today because when we started this show an hour ago, we were told that the police and the politicians were expecting about 30 protests and counter-protests this evening. That number has now risen to 100, apparently. So this is the latest, that the police are now saying they're expecting around 100 protests and counter-protests this evening. Now, it opens up a whole host of questions, doesn't it? Are our politicians doing enough about this? Is there two-tier policing? Mark Rowley, the Met top cop, has come out and said it's nonsense. You know, we've got Keir Starmer saying it's nonsense. Well, we'll play you a clip, surely, that appears to show that there actually is.
He's also said that even saying there's two-tier policing could put police officers at risk, so they're really upping the ante on that one. They really want to quash the idea that there is any two-tier policing in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are going to play you a clip of a police officer essentially admitting to two-tier policing. We're also going to play you a clip of Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. Now, Parliament is not in session at the moment, so there is no real political scrutiny. We obviously don't have an opposition as it currently stands, really, do we, to speak of? Some people are thinking that Elon Musk is the only opposition at the moment.
I haven't heard
to
anything
the
from
government.
Rishi Sunak. He is actually the leader of the opposition.
Yeah, and he's obviously off with his trotters up, as Danny Dyer would probably say somewhere. But you know, and so here we are, which is a situation which is a vacuum. Now, Yvette Cooper was held to task and asked, have you actually been speaking to all of the police officers? She gave a very squiffy answer to that. We've got clips to bring you, but I want to know from you, do you think that Labour are actually doing enough here? How do you rate their performance on this so far? And are they doing things that might actually inflame tensions even more? We've got a couple more stories that we're going to bring you shortly about this Operation Scatter, scattering asylum seekers all around the country, but also apparently plans to allow criminals, violent offenders and terrorists a place on the social housing waiting list. Bit tone deaf, possibly.
Yes, perhaps. Well, please do get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But let's get the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Patrick, Emily, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon to you. 3 minutes past 1, the top story. 3 rioters have been jailed for violent disorder following nationwide protests after their sentencing was today fast-tracked. Derek Drummond, who's 58, is the first person to receive a prison sentence on a violent disorder charge and was ordered to spend 3 years behind bars. Meanwhile, Liam Riley from Kirkdale and Declan Gearan from Liverpool were sentenced to 20 months and 2.5 years, respectively. Meanwhile, police are braced for more planned riots today, with at least 30 anti-immigrant rallies expected across England later. A list of immigration law firms has been shared in online chat groups as possible targets for gatherings, with a message inviting people to mask up and show up. However, police are urging people to ignore the list of locations, telling rioters that officers will be waiting for them. Speaking after another emergency Cobra meeting yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer warned that those involved in violence will be dealt with within a week from arrest.
I made it very clear on a number of occasions that those involved will feel the full force of the law. So we coordinated, we went through some of the numbers. Over 400 people now have been arrested 100 are being charged, some in relation to online activity, and a number of them are already in court. And I'm now expecting substantive sentencing before the end of this week.
Well, that comes as the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has dismissed accusations of two-tier policing. He's called it complete nonsense. The criticism came from figures including Nigel Farage and Elon Musk, who argued that last week's disorder was handled more severely than it would have been if ethnic minorities were involved. So Mark Rowley's been addressing those claims.
It's complete nonsense. We have commentators from either end of the political spectrum who like to throw accusations of bias at the police, because we stand in the middle, we operate independently under the law without fear or favour.
Well, the last week of riots were sparked by misinformation online following the Southport stabbings on Monday of last week. And Shadow Minister for Crime and Policing, Matt Vickers, told us on Breakfast this morning he thinks online criminality should be taken just as seriously as offline.
Social media operators have to take responsibility for some of the things that are going on. Do you know what? If you allow people to spread misinformation on the scale it's being spread, that has real consequences. We saw the online safety bill come forward. One of the problems with social media is that it moves so fast. Technology moves so fast. But we saw the online safety bill come forward, creating that precedent that these operators will be held to account for what goes on. They do have a responsibility to make sure that misinformation's controlled, is prevented.
Matt Vickers there speaking to us this morning. Well, Kamala Harris says that Tim Walz is the vice president that America deserves after officially unveiling him as her running mate at a campaign rally. The Democratic presidential nominee says she chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz because he's a fighter for the middle class and he's a patriot. The former teacher is considered a more progressive choice. Here, Fujitsu is holding its first ever meeting with a group of post office sub-postmasters. That's after hundreds of branch managers were wrongly convicted of fraud because of faults in Fujitsu's Horizon IT system. The Japanese company is now under pressure to pay compensation. And a software provider has been provisionally fined just over £6 million for a ransomware attack that disrupted NHS services. The Information Commissioner's Office has found that Advanced Computer Software Group failed to implement measures to protect the personal information of just over 80,000 people in 2022. The attack led to the distribution of critical services and data, including phone numbers and medical records. The Royal Mint has opened a factory to remove gold from old TVs, computers and phones to then turn it into jewellery and collectibles. The firm plans to extract the metal from 4,000 tonnes of circuit boards each year. They say it's part of efforts to reduce reliance on mining and to encourage more sustainable industry practices. To Paris and the Olympics, Team GB are on their hunt for their 1,000th medal today in the history of the Games. And it could come in either the athletics, the cycling or sailing. Great Britain added 4 medals to their collection in Paris last night, with Josh Kerr winning silver in the 1,500 metres. And there were also podium finishes in track cycling, in skateboarding and in boxing too. And just a quick breaking line for you coming to us from the Supreme Court this afternoon. Shamima Begum has lost her final bid to challenge the removal of her British citizenship. Judges at the highest court in the land ruled that her proposed appeal doesn't stand under law. The 24-year-old, who was found, of course, in a Syrian refugee camp after she travelled there as a teenager, lost her initial appeal last year on national security grounds, and this latest ruling today does confirm she won't be able to appeal any further. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you for another update just after 1:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
good afternoon, Britain. Welcome back. It is now 1:09. Now, as you've been hearing, 6,000 police officers are now on standby. The nation bracing itself for more than 100 protests today. Earlier, we were reporting 30. This seems to now be over 100 the police and government are expecting, possibly more counter-protests as well. And this comes as more than 400 people have been arrested so far. The Met Police is now vowing to use every power, tactic and tool to protect the country from this unrest.
Well, look, in the past hour, 3 men have been jailed for their part in the Southport riots after their sentencing was fast-tracked by the Prime Minister. So the Crown Prosecution Service has warned that it's just the tip of the iceberg, and actually some of them were given quite lengthy sentences, actually, 3 years and 2.5 years as well. Well, earlier this morning, Met Police Commissioner Mark Rowley said something which has proven to be incredibly controversial, and we will be discussing this, but here is what he said when he was accused of two-tier policing.
It's complete nonsense. We have commentators from either end of the political spectrum who like to throw accusations of bias at the police because we stand in the middle, we operate independently under the law without fear or favour.
So there we go, Mark Rowley's words there. But earlier as well, former Labour MP Khalid Mahmood, he blamed the Conservatives for their lack of interest in the police force, which has made it very difficult for the police now.
It's of course very, very difficult when you have this sort of violence across most of the country and you try to control it. Resources are limited, as we all know, because the previous government hadn't not invested into the police. And we've got serious problems in trying to resolve this. There has been a huge agenda to basically manipulate against the immigrants that have come through. There is legal migration, which is our responsibility because we allow that to happen. And then there's the people who come through illegally. So we have to address both of those.
Well, it's all very well and good talking about two-tier policing, isn't it? But a lot of people think that this comes from the top and it comes from politicians. And I'm just going to play a little clip now of Yvette Cooper, who was being grilled, really, about whether or not she's actually acted appropriately and whether or not she's been giving enough scrutiny to police chiefs about all of this. And we'll have a look at the political reaction. So here is Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary.
Why did South Yorkshire Police senior officers not put an exclusion zone around that hotel, which is, you will be aware as Home Secretary, that is normal standard operating police procedure? Why was that not? When you asked the Chief Constable, how did she reply?
As you know, Nick...
So you've not asked her, have you, Home Secretary?
You've not asked her, have you, Home Secretary, was the question there.
We have a problem here. Let's introduce Christopher Hope, our political editor, who's joining us in the studio. We have a problem here, don't we? Because Parliament is not sitting. All the calls to recall Parliament have so far been ignored by the government. There's not really a formal opposition at the moment.
There isn't, and you asked correctly, where is Rishi Sunak? He's the opposition leader until the 2nd of November. We've heard it from other candidates who want to stand. You heard from Robert Jenrick yesterday, quite interestingly, saying that politicians must call out violence from all parts of our communities, not just target on or not talk about only one side of it. I was watching Nigel Farage last night. He had a very interesting former policeman on who said that part of the problem with this two-tier policing idea is that we see the police standing back on these clips on social media, and it looks like, why aren't the police batons drawn going after people, and they are in other places? Apparently, as part of it is if you arrest people, you take 2 people away from the front line and you risk weakening the attempt at keeping the peace at the time. So what they were saying last night was quite interesting, is that there's a kind of issue of how the effort it takes to arrest somebody is like 2 hours of police time away from the front line. That could be part of the problem. But we still do see, it looks like the police reacting differently to different communities. Yeah. That's part of the problem. And it's not being explained or addressed, I think, by the political leaders.
Well, shortly we're going to be talking to a police officer. We've got a clip from an officer in the West Midlands, I think it is, who, frankly, does appear to admit to two-tier policing, really, talking about speaking with unelected community elders about how they want their protests to be policed. And I don't think that's a luxury that gets afforded to a lot of people. But politically, Christopher, this is having an impact on Keir Starmer, isn't it, in popularity, etc.?
Indeed, his honeymoon is definitely seen to be over. He's fallen down in terms of satisfaction ratings. You would expect him to have a good 3 or 4 months of goodwill from an electorate that voted him in with a huge majority, but it hasn't happened. And I think there are questions about how they are trying to address this issue. To say that it's all caused by the far right is so frustrating, I think, to so many people who watch GB News and listen to our station on the radio. They say, well, it's not far right to be worried about immigration. I think that difference is not understood at all by the
Yeah, and just on that point, another couple of stories that we've been discussing today is actually about how the Labour government is going to resolve the issue of asylum seekers and migrants and the way they're going to house them. So, of course, we know they don't want hotels to be used, they don't want RAF bases, they certainly don't want barges to be used. So now what's being called a scatter operation. Now, this is going to put a lot of pressure on local councils and also local housing, which could make things worse.
These HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, they're going to trying to find councils to find areas within communities rather than having in hotels. The hotels policy was a complete distillation of government failure. I mean, to put people to say come across the channel and we'll put you into a hotel is like an invitation to come across the channel to many people. And so it looks bad internationally, it is bad, and of course it's now being focused appallingly by rioters, and that's also a disaster. So I think they've got to deal with that. They can blame the Tory party for that is their policy. But they've taken away one of the things which would deal with the problem, which is Rwanda. I mean, it seemed to be working to a degree in Ireland, wasn't it, when you saw people leave Northern Ireland to go into Southern Ireland. So that's gone away. But we're waiting to hear from other ministers today. There's no plans as we speak for another Cobra meeting. There's one last night that Keir Starmer chaired. He had an emergency cabinet meeting yesterday morning, nothing planned. Today is a huge day, 100 planned far-right demonstrations, 30 counter-demonstrations. It is all...
Right, so it's 100 far-right and then 30 on top of that counter-protest. OK.
And there's 4,000 riot police preparing to deploy 2,000 more. It's a huge day for this crisis, frankly, affecting this government.
So there is the genuine expectation, Christopher, that this evening is going to really kick off.
I was told by sources that they were looking towards Wednesday. As early this week, Wednesday was the day they were worried about. And looking at the numbers that we're hearing from the police and security sources right now, it's looking very, very serious tonight.
We hope it
passes, obviously, peacefully, that people can demonstrate and no violence happens, because it's awful.
Yeah, there will be a lot of people watching and listening now who live near some of these areas, who will be absolutely terrified.
I was talking to
go out this evening.
Of all communities.
Yeah, all communities. We'll be absolutely terrified. So let's hope that actually people decide. Actually, I'm not gonna go out. I'm not going to join a protest. I'm certainly not going to take part in any violent unrest. We know there are going to be huge numbers of police out there.
I would say longer term, they have to learn. They have to look at the underlying reasons for why this is happening. You can't just say it's a kind of a political view by people who are far right. Well, there is a wider concern about immigration, the government's approach towards it, legal and illegal, that they've got to address.
Absolutely. And on that, right, so this is a story that's just come out in the last couple of hours. It's Jonathan Hayes, who's the man who tried to disarm this, alleged Southport stabber. And he was stabbed in the leg as a result. And he was interviewed today on Radio 4. And he said, I actually don't think the trouble on the right has got anything to do with all these Southport stabbings. There appears to be a strong undercurrent of discontent for some. I do get dismayed when I hear Keir Starmer talking about how the police are going to come down with the full force of the law on these people. But they're not actually talking about the root cause. And they need to start listening and understanding that and addressing that cause rather than the symptoms. You've echoed that. This is an individual who tried to disarm the Southport stabber.
He's a hero, that guy. He went towards the trouble and dealt with the attacker as best he could and was stabbed for his trouble. I think what we have not heard yet from the government, and we are trying to get them to talk to GB News as much as possible, as you might expect, my job is to do that, is to get them to explain, let's deal with the crisis, but let's tell people we will listen to you after this is over. We're not justifying in any sense any of the trouble, but let's listen to what may be some underlying causes here.
Yeah, otherwise you're just hoping that things will die down and all the problems will magically go away. Yeah. And that's not how things work, is it? Christopher Hope, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Right, OK, so the former head of counter-terrorism policing, Neil Basu, has said that some violence during these riots so far has crossed the line into terrorism. I think, given that we're expecting quite a lot going on tonight, it's worth noting whether or not he's right, isn't it? Well, joining us now is the former head of the National Counter-Terrorism Security Office, is Chris Phillips. Chris, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So, has it crossed the line into terrorism? Do you suspect that some of the things that we might see tonight might actually be treated as terror offences going forward?
Well, there are most definitely terror offences in there, and there's no doubt whatsoever that some of the people's actions would amount to terrorism under the legislation as it stands. Whether or not it's a good idea to prosecute them for that is another matter altogether, and I would suggest it isn't, because there are such a big portion of the population that have sympathies with the underlying issues around immigration, which politicians are just simply refusing to deal with, of both parties, actually. I think to start using terrorism legislation would probably be a silly thing to do.
Chris, now there was quite a lot of concern over how a particular demonstration in Birmingham was treated by the police, or not so much treated by the police. I just want to show you a clip of an officer who spoke about why they made the decision around how to police it. Let's have a look.
We knew that there was going to be a large amount of people out on that counter-protest. We knew who the vast majority of those people were. We'd had conversations in terms of what that was likely to look like, and so our policing response was commensurate to that intelligence and the information that we'd held with our partners and communities prior to that event taking place.
And Chris, what do you make of that? Clearly, the police have an extremely difficult job in managing all sorts of different communities in this country, all the different tensions as well. You've got the far-right protests, you've now got counter-protests too, you've got people claiming to be defending their patch in this country. But it does seem as though that police officer there did appear to admit that actually there is a little bit of two-tier policing going on.
Well, there is, in as much as they're trying to be responsive to the issues. Now, it's one thing to have views and to shout them. It's another thing to go out specifically for violence. And I think the police have to deal with them slightly differently. You know, if you're going to go out and shout things, it's not quite as bad as someone that's going out tooled up to attack police officers or buildings or immigrants or whatever. So it is a very difficult job that the police are trying to do. They know very well that this could all get really out of hand and we could have major issues. The police, I know, will realise very well that a large portion of the population have got major concerns with with immigration, and they're having to stand in the middle between 60% perhaps of the population and these the immigrants they're in these hotels.
Yeah, no, indeed. I think there are several different things happening all at once here, right? You've got just random looting and people wanting to steal shoes and go and, kick a Greg's window in or something, which is just, insane. You've got people who are actually, torturing migrant hotels, awful stuff. You've then got some of these counter-protests. I think, Chris, one of the big problems for people looking at that clip is, so the police have met with these unelected community elders. I mean, who the heck are they, right? And so they've basically been allowed to dictate how they want that situation to be policed. I mean, there were people with weapons there. You can see car registrations in those pictures, right? So you can see the registrations of those cars, of people hanging out the windows, razzing it around. Is there even the whiff of a prosecution going on here? I just really don't think that was a particularly good look. But, look, Chris, thank you very much. I'm sorry we're going to have to leave it there. We've had quite a lot to get through. It's been great to have you on, and I do hope to talk to you again very, very soon, including quite possibly later on this evening, actually, if it does all kick off. So it's Chris Phillips there, as a former counter-terror cop. Thank you.
Yes, don't worry. Just because Patrick is here doesn't mean he's not going to be doing his show tonight. But we're going to, of course, be continuing with this story in just a few moments. Please don't go anywhere. Stay with us.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Did you ever flirt with the idea of going to America?
Yeah, I've twice happened to be. Once I was offered in Canada the job of a weatherman.
Oh.
Yeah, I was offered that. And I just sort of thought of it, what is the point where your mother, your father would never see you on TV? What's the point of doing it if nobody knows you on it, So I thought...
Big money, though, even for a weatherman.
I did, yeah, it was more than a weather job, but I said no, basically. And then I went and I did this quiz show for Fox TV.
Oh.
Yeah, they said, we want the Irish guy that does the lottery. I think they meant Dermot O'Leary or something. they ended up, they got me, and I couldn't believe it. And I went over to do a daytime version of this. And then 3 days into it, they changed everything and they said, this is so good, we're putting this out in the evening. And I remember phoning my wife and saying, we're going to have to move out to California.
Oh, wow.
They really want me here, and I'm going down. You know that street with all the palm trees in it, whatever. That's the way I was going to work, in this limo and whatever. And I had a bungalow there and a golf cart. It was absolutely incredible. Anyway, I'll cut this very long story short. So I'm working really, really bad. A lot of very ignorant people, it has to be said. And really have one regret in my life, that I didn't punch a guy when I was out there. I really would have, if I had my life to live again, I would have really satisfiedly been sacked for punching this git. But basically, anyway, they put the show out. One episode of the show went out and it came fourth in its rating. So it was behind Lost, it was behind The Biggest Loser, there was something else there.
Fair enough.
Fair enough, and it came fourth, and that was it. It disappeared. 36 shows or so disappeared. Disappeared, never to be shown again.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:26, and we're going to return to the big story of the day. 6,000 police officers on standby ahead of now 100 expected protests and another 30 counter-protests. This is what we're expecting now later today.
Well, it comes as 3 men have been jailed for their part in the Southport riots after their sentencing was fast-tracked by the Prime Minister. The Crown Prosecution Service warned that it was just the tip of the iceberg. Well, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent, John Rentoul, joins us now. John, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. There are big political questions being asked now, aren't there, about whether or not Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer are handling this particularly well. No one can question this is an unbelievably difficult situation for them, and they've not got an easy job, OK? But at the same time, what do you make of the way that Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer have gone about this so far?
Well, I mean, I think they've said all the right things. They've condemned the violence unequivocally, and they have magically procured places in prisons that we were told were completely full to allow the courts to sentence people and put them away. Now, if the police certainly seem to be arresting people, that seems to be happening, and it's being processed through the courts. It all actually sounds fairly normal, to be honest. The idea that we need to have weekend sittings of courts doesn't yet seem to be necessary. And as for these 100 events this evening, well, let's wait and see what actually transpires.
Yeah, let's wait and see, and hopefully everyone does stay at home. But whatever. I just want to put something to you, John, which is it's another John actually. It's Jonathan Hayes. Who's the man who tried to disarm the Southport stabber. He was stabbed in the leg himself as a result of this. He's actually done quite an astonishing intervention on Radio 4 today. And he said that he says he gets dismayed to hear Keir Starmer talking about how the police are going to come down with the full force of the law on people. They're not actually talking about the root cause. They need to start listening and understanding that. They need to address the cause rather than the symptoms, alluding there really to people's concerns on immigration and things. You said that Keir Starmer has said all the right things. Has he?
Well, broadly speaking, yes. I mean, I didn't hear that John Hayes interview. But if he's suggesting that the root cause of those terrible stabbings in Southport is immigration policy.
I think he's suggesting. Sorry, just to clarify, it's fair enough why you might have got that impression. I think what he's saying is the root cause of general public anger at the moment in the country.
Yeah, he said the stabbing wasn't what's caused.
Yeah.
It was a trigger, but it hasn't caused. There's all this underlying unrest over immigration.
Right. No, I see what he's saying. I mean, that sounds a little bit like the Nigel Farage argument, which is that Nigel Farage, to be fair to him, has finally come out and unequivocally condemned street violence and thuggery, without putting a but at the end of the sentence. So good for him. But he still insists that there are underlying causes which have to be taken seriously. Now, obviously, yes, people are opposed to levels of immigration that we've seen recently, and I think the government is completely aware of that. But to suggest in any way at all that that is justification for the violence we've seen, I think is completely unacceptable.
But it is the case, John, that sometimes when we've seen protests and riots in the past for a number of different causes, politicians have spoken about some of the causes, the deeper causes, what people's grievances might be, and that is not to justify violent behaviour. You should be able to talk about these things at the same time, shouldn't you? You should be able to absolutely condemn far-right thuggery, violent protest, attacks on minorities, attacks on places of worship, and at the same time talk about massive political failure when it comes to thorny issues like immigration.
Yes, no, I completely agree with that. But you have to keep them completely separate, and you cannot allow the suggestion that the one justifies the other. And it's exactly the same with Black Lives Matter protests or with pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Though you cannot make the connection between the political views that those people have and the political arguments about injustice that they feel to say that justifies violence. It never does. And the idea that Nigel Farage is putting about that there's some kind of two-tier policing going on.
Well,
that somehow,
John, you're pinning a lot on Nigel Farage. I mean, a lot of people.
Tolerated from one quarter when it's not tolerated from another.
John, it's not just Nigel Farage, is it, that's talking about two-tier?
It is just Nigel Farage.
Well,
it's Nigel Farage
can I just stop you there, because I can understand if you weren't necessarily watching some of the previous segments on the show, and that's fair enough, you're a busy man. But we did actually play a clip of a police officer essentially confirming that there is two-tier policing, John, and that in one instance they're perfectly prepared to go and meet with community elders and talk about how they would like their demonstration on a roundabout in Birmingham to be policed. But whereas I'm not convinced that necessarily happens the other way around. So, I think there's a concern.
I'm not having any of that. No,
I think there's a difficulty, isn't there, about conflating people who have got, genuine concerns about things like immigration or asylum seeker hotels or things like that, and people who've got genuine concerns about the way that things have been policed, versus people who are, trying to whip up hatred, right? I think it's, we can't try to bracket everyone in the same. But can I just ask you one thing, John, about the potential response to what we hope doesn't happen tonight, but unfortunately looks like it might, right? Do you think that Keir Starmer could go further? Do you think that we could see things like sanctions on social media, like localised lockdowns? I wonder if there's a risk there of, looking a bit authoritarian.
Yeah, well, I hope not. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that was necessary or justified. We'll have to see. So far, to touch wood, and I don't want to minimise this at all. But so far these riots have not been terribly serious. They've obviously been extremely dangerous, and setting fire to a hotel with asylum seekers in it was completely unacceptable and dangerous. But so far, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
It hasn't turned out to be the sort of terrible violence that it could be, and let's hope that it stays that way. And I don't think extreme measures such as local lockdowns would be necessary.
Well, let's hope things start to peter out. I mean, we were just looking at clips there, footage of
we're hoping it's gonna rain next
immigration centres boarding up their windows in preparation. Let's hope that people actually just decide to stay at home this evening, as they should.
I agree with
John
that.
Rentoul, thank you. We're going to have to leave it there. Sorry, chief political commentator at The Independent. We're going to take the headlines right now with Sam Francis. We'll be back in a tick.
Very good afternoon to you. The top stories at just after 1:30. 3 rioters have been jailed for violent disorder following nationwide riots after their sentencing was today fast-tracked. 58-year-old Derek Drummond is the first person to be sentenced for violent disorder in Southport, linked to, of course, that fatal knife attack that saw 3 young girls lose their life. Riley will spend 20 months behind bars for being involved in Liverpool city centre riots. And Giran admitted to arson. He has been jailed for 30 months. Meanwhile, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has dismissed accusations of two-tier policing. He's called it complete nonsense. The criticism came from figures including Nigel Farage and billionaire Elon Musk, who argued last week's disorder was handled more severely than it would have been if it had involved ethnic minorities. And that comes as more than 6,000 specialist police officers are gearing up for more than 30 potential rallies across the UK later, though the Prime Minister insists communities will be kept safe. It comes as more than 400 people have been detained across England and Northern Ireland so far. That's according to police sources, with that number expected to rise. Shamima Begum has lost her final challenge to remove her British citizenship. The 24-year-old was found in a Syrian refugee camp after travelling there as a teenager in 2015 and lost her initial appeal last year on national security grounds. Today's latest ruling at the Supreme Court confirms she won't be able to appeal any further. Fujitsu is holding its first ever meeting with a group of post office sub-postmasters today. Hundreds of branch managers were wrongly convicted of fraud because of faults in the tech firm's Horizon IT system. The Japanese company is now under pressure to pay compensation. A software firm has been told it faces a £6 million fine for failing to prevent a cyber attack that disrupted NHS services. The data watchdog says the Advanced Computer Software Group didn't protect the personal information of more than 80,000 people, which was held to ransom in 2022. And a quick update on news from the Olympics. Team GB are hoping for more success later at the Games after yesterday adding 4 medals to their collection. Josh Kerr won silver in the 1,500 metres, and there were also podium finishes in track cycling, skateboarding and boxing. Those are the latest headlines from the GB newsroom. For now, I'm Sam Francis. Your next update just after 2 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Quite a lot of cloud around today, but some sunny spells. A fair few showers, mostly in the west, and a cool breeze, and quite windy actually across northwestern areas. Thanks to this area of low pressure, bringing plenty of showers. Been a wet start to the day across western Scotland. The rain will be a bit more sporadic this afternoon, more on and off, and there will be some brighter spells, but plenty of showers packing in across Scotland, through northern England, Wales and into the Midlands. Much of the east will stay dry, but we'll see a bit more cloud coming in here through the afternoon. Some sunny spells for Northern Ireland and Wales during the middle part of the afternoon. It's a cooler feel, particularly in the east. Temperatures close to average, actually. Low 20s across the south. In the high teens further north. And feeling cooler because of the gusty wind and the showers, which will continue to drift in on that gusty wind over the Highlands and the Western Isles well into this evening. The showers should ease across northeastern parts of Scotland, so some sunny spells here. And not too many showers to end the day for Northern Ireland and Northern England as well, so decent chance here that it will be quite dry. There's that cloudier zone working in through the day over the Midlands and eastern areas, and further south and west brightening up for a time, but here then later on more cloud will start to move in through the evening and particularly overnight, bringing rain and drizzle by the time we get to tomorrow morning. Elsewhere, many places will become dry through the night. The winds will ease a little across northwest Scotland, but still quite a breezy night, and temperatures dropping down to 13 or 14 for England and Wales, 11 or 12 across central and northern Scotland. Tomorrow's going to be a pretty drab day for Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud, rain and drizzle, and that rain and drizzle will gradually spread into southern Scotland, eventually over northern England, and eventually into the east as well, though again many places here will stay dry. Temperatures are generally still up into the 20s, feeling quite warm and quite humid though for much of tomorrow.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. The eastbound side of the M621 Elland Road to Holbeck Junction 2 towards Cemetery Road, now a lane shut. A collision there causing queues. There's a breakdown northbound M1. It's just cleared before 10. The turn off of Luton Airport Spur Road, so all lanes back open, but it's in the roadworks. So we're still seeing a fair amount of congestion on the approaches. Now London, clockwise M25, the entry slip road still closed off at Brentwood 28 for emergency repairs. Big queues for 5 miles southbound back along the A12, the Brentwood bypass, and 4 miles either side of the M25. And Wincheap in Canterbury, the A28 still blocked just around the Wincheap roundabout. There's a shed load there, naturally causing delays by the railway bridge. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
OK, welcome back. All right, so you might be seeing on the bottom of your screens there the news that broke about an hour or so ago. It's about Shamima Begum. So the ISIS bride has lost her final bid to challenge the removal of her British citizenship.
Yes, so the now 24-year-old, who was found in a Syrian refugee camp after travelling there as a teenager in 2015, so it's 9 years later now, she's lost her initial appeal last year on national security grounds, and now this latest ruling at the Supreme Court confirms she cannot appeal any further. So is this the end of the road for Shamima Begum's case to come back to Britain?
How many times have we said that, by the way?
That is true.
How many times have I sat in this exact studio and had this exact thing where I go, surely this is the end of the road now for Shamima, surely this is the end of the road. You know, I'm sure that there will be a ready supply of lawyers who will be, you know, willing to try to fight her corner, of course, as is indeed the part of their job. But 3 judges from the UK's final Court of Appeal ruled, quote, the grounds of appeal do not raise an arguable point of law. So it confirms the previous ruling that the then Home Secretary Sajid Javid, which just show how long ago this all kicks off, had the power to set aside concerns that she may have been a victim of child trafficking. So that was the argument here, that she was trafficked, that she was a victim, that she was too young to really fully know what she was doing. There was even some question marks over whether or not, you know, various different intelligence services knew about her going there. Anyway, they've basically decided no, none of that really matters. She will not be able to come home from where she left.
Now, this is the highest court in the United Kingdom. Perhaps there is a question mark over whether she could appeal now to a European court.
Well, possibly. It'll be interesting to see, won't it? This story has obviously just landed about an hour or so ago. Last year, she lost her first appeal against the decision to revoke her citizenship on national security grounds. Earlier this year, 3 judges unanimously dismissed her bid to overturn, and then it's just happened again today. So, you know, thoughts about the idea that Shamima Begum might be coming back to Britain anytime soon appear to be quashed. You know, what happens now? Some people will say, well, they don't really care. You know, she's made her bed, she can lie in it. Other people, obviously, you know, do want her back, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, every time this story comes back, people say she was very young. She should be Britain's problem. You know, born and bred here. Yes, she made a decision, aged 15, to do something very stupid, they say. To go off there, and therefore she should come back here and face the law here. Others say absolutely not. She should stay there. She made her bed and she can lie in it.
Yeah. All right. Look, I'm just going to go to a couple of views because we've not actually done that yet. Very quickly, it's gbnews.com/yours say. David's been in touch. He's picking up on something that actually an individual who tackled the Southport stabber said. Southport stabber, said, and was stabbed himself as a result of all of this, said that actually Keir Starmer doesn't feel he's dealing with the kind of the root cause of some of the issues at play here. David says, look, nearly 4,000 people have come across the channel since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. They're not smashing the gangs, are they? And that is
Toby's asked a question. He says, could the riots in the UK be being instigated by foreign assets seeking to incite divisions within the UK? Now, that may sound like an absolutely mad question. There are quite a lot of people looking into this to see if there are actually foreign bots, or whatever you might call them, pumping out information online to try and get people out on the streets. That's actually a legitimate question to ask. It could be happening. We know the social media is open to everyone else around the world, too. Anyone can post anything on social media. Could that be something that is helping to make things worse rather than better?
All right, well, we've got a heck of a lot coming your way. We are gearing up, unfortunately, for what appears to be a night of incredible tension on the streets of Britain. We're also going to be touching on more controversy at the Olympics with that Algerian boxer that some people are saying is a man being through to the women's final. And we also have something that's a little bit of light relief for you in all of this as well. Where in Britain do you think is the skiving capital, the skivers' capital of Britain? Stay tuned to find out on Good Afternoon Britain.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Apparently, almost 70% of 18 to 25-year-olds, we don't know whether that's men or women, but they say that women shouldn't breastfeed in public. 19% would even go as far as labelling it disgusting.
Well, only a quarter of Brits say that women shouldn't have to cover up when they're breastfeeding. So clearly there is a big debate here and one to get to the bottom of. And to do so, we're joined by parenting journalist Annette Kellu. Really good to see you this morning, Annette.
Really good to see you.
Why is this stigma still existing in our society?
I think we've got a case here going on of double standards. I don't know about you, but I live near a park, OK? One little hint of sun, the men get completely naked. Honestly, you've never seen anything like it. The bodies are out, all different shapes and sizes. So why is it not OK for a woman to feed her baby? You know, we've got this whole thing. They're OK to be naked doing what they want. Why can't a woman just feed her baby? Why is it shameful in 2024? And it's interesting what you say about the 18 to 25-year-olds, because I really want to know, are they men or women? Because I feel like they'd be men.
I was going to say, have you got a hunch? Have you got a suspicion?
Yes, I have. And I think as well, they're thinking of them as sexy time, you know? And I feel like they're not... Well, maybe that's because they're bombarded with images and they see things like that they're seeing it in that context. But it's really not. It's feeding the baby. It's simple. Shouldn't be shameful.
But do you think for men it's like they can't see the difference? There's so much porn in society, isn't there, that breasts are sexualised and seen as this sexual object and not actually for their main primary purpose, which is actually feeding a child.
Media association,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, they can't.
And you can't see that they could have two functions.
Absolutely. And to them as well, I feel like they see it, and on the other side of it, they think like, ooh, mummy, and that brings up weird feelings for them, maybe.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:48 and we're going to turn our attention to the Olympics because the Algerian boxer Iman Khalif has successfully gone through to the women's boxing final against China's Yang Liu as the boxer reaches for that gold medal.
Oh, yes. Well, the news comes after Khalif found themselves at the centre of a gender debate after they and fellow boxer Lin Yu-ting were banned from competing in last year's World Championships because they were, well, supposedly found to have XY chromosomes, which would have made them men, right? That's the thing.
Well, yeah, we're joined by the co-director for Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Susan, there has been a huge amount of confusion over this, how an athlete can be banned from a World Championships but then go ahead to perform now in the women's final of the boxing at the Olympics. Why is there this difference of opinion when it comes to this particular athlete?
Well, the IOC have taken over the governance for this Olympics over boxing. It was previously governed by the International Boxing Authority, and so they had rules in place that said that to be eligible for the female category, you had to be biologically female, and they were screened apparently two of these boxers, and they have said they found they had male karyotype, which means that they would have had XY, i.e. male chromosomes, and that they were responsive to testosterone, so that they felt they had an advantage. But the IOC have different rules, and the IOC have actually for quite a long time had policies which are felt to be quite destructive of women's sports. It's the kind of policies that we saw a few years ago in the Tokyo Olympics allow someone like Laurel Hubbard, who was a very openly out transgender person, not even someone with a medical condition, being able to compete, many felt very unfairly, in women's weightlifting.
Yeah, can I just ask that? You mentioned Laurel Hubbard, who turned up, by the way, I think, like an absolute disgrace. I remember covering that. I don't think that they particularly tried. I wonder if there was some desire not to try, really, there, as in some way to try to prove that, oh, look, you know, men don't necessarily dominate women's sports, etc. I literally remember covering that at the time. Do you think that what we are witnessing here is a man punching women in the face for sport and going to win a gold medal for it?
I think it's possibly slightly more complex because we are probably, in all likelihood, looking at a case where this boxer has this medical condition. And it means that when these children are born, people think they are female because they have ambiguous genitalia. If Khalif has a condition like castesemania, which of course caused a lot of controversy in the 2016 Rio Olympics. This condition means that these individuals are receptive to testosterone at puberty, and they will go through a form of male puberty. And so the question then is, do these people have a greater advantage than women? And I think that's probably undeniable. It seems terribly unfair on individuals, and it can be very obviously hugely distressing for people when they're going through this. But it's also unfortunately ripe for exploitation by anybody who's unscrupulously hoping to put their country in gold medal position, or scouts who are looking for athletes who might be able to exploit this. So there's a concern as well that you could see some people with medical conditions being exploited. And if this is a case of 5ARD, as castesemania was, what we do know from studies in places where these conditions are prolific is these children tend to then start to identify as boys when they go through this puberty and when they realise that their biological sex is actually male. In a very similar way to there was an Austrian skier back in the 1960s who'd been mistakenly assigned female at birth. I will use that because it's the one time it's right, and was found by the Olympics who did then do testing, sex testing, to be male. And he went on to have corrective surgery and to live a very happy, successful life, getting married and having a daughter.
I mean, Susan, just very quickly, because we're running out of time, but what confuses me, we spoke to a guest a little bit earlier who seemed to suggest that no one's really seen the detail of this test that was done in the run-up to the World Championships. It doesn't appear to be that the sharing of information here, everything doesn't seem to be as transparent as it should be. If we're talking about fairness at the height of sport, which is the Olympics, surely that should be out in the open, Susan.
Yes, it should. The problem is that tests the IBA did cannot be made public without the consent of the individuals, because there are obviously rules about medical confidentiality for very good reason. So the people who have the power to deal with this and make it open and transparent are the IOC. And they should have been doing this by bringing in cheek swabs, because that's all that's needed, and testing for sex. And it would have nipped it all in the bud, because especially in contact sports where you do need to ensure that you've got safety.
Thank you very much. Sorry to cut that short. Well, Susan Smith there. When we come back, more very concerning details about what is predicted to be a night of riots. Now it's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Quite a lot of cloud around as we head into this evening. A few showers, but many places dry. Quite a fresh breeze, though. In fact, really quite windy across northwest Scotland, close to this area of low pressure. These weather fronts will bring cloud and rain for many tomorrow, but actually through this evening we'll see the cloud thickening across South Wales and southwest England. Still a lot of showers in western Scotland, one or two across northern England this evening, but they're tending to fade away. For many, it'll become a dry night with lengthy clear spells across the east, getting quite windy through the middle of the night, in particular across northern Scotland, but elsewhere the winds will ease down. Temperatures dipping down to single figures in rural parts of Scotland, but generally pretty warm across the south, and the warm and humid air is going to really push in through tomorrow. A dull, damp start for Wales and southwest England. Most of the day here is going to be pretty drab. Something a bit brighter further east, but it will cloud over here through the day. The cloud and rain will trickle into parts of Northern Ireland, the south in particular, and across northwest England. Much of the morning, fine and dry across a good part of Scotland. Still a few showers, but not as many as today, and it won't be as windy as today either. In fact, much of the day looking fine across Aberdeenshire. But for southwest Scotland, the rain and drizzle will trickle in here. As I said, dull and damp for most of the day for Wales and southwest England, and outbreaks of rain will spread sporadically across the Midlands, then into northern England. Could turn heavier through the evening as well. Much of East Anglia and the southeast staying dry, just turning cloudy. Here again, temperatures into the low 20s. Generally quite a warm, humid feeling day through much of tomorrow. The rain and drizzle continuing to push northwards, actually pepping up for a time across Scotland as well. So some heavier bursts here during tomorrow evening. Then it turns fresher again for Friday. Some showers on Saturday, and it is likely to hot up again with the humidity on Sunday and Monday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway. An incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. David from Kent was our last big winner. Listen to what he had to say about getting that winning call.
Hi, I'm David from Kent and I won £15,000 and it couldn't have come at a better time. I was gobsmacked. What have you got to lose for what it costs? In fact, I've done it again this week, so I'd recommend it to anybody.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th of August. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Patrick Christie's.
Now, Tinderbox Britain, 6,000 police officers are on standby. 3 men have been jailed for their part in the Southport riots. The CPS is saying it's just the tip of the iceberg. This, as the nation braces itself for what could be the biggest night of riots yet.
Yes, indeed. And homes for criminals. Convicted criminals, including violent offenders and even terrorists, will no longer be banned from the social housing waiting list under Labour. I mean, this comes off the back of new plans to scatter asylum seekers all around the country as well. Has Labour got its priorities wrong?
And left in the cold, Labour's decision to scrap universal winter fuel payments will mean millions of pensioners face higher bills from October. That despite energy prices falling for every other household. Are pensioners being punished, maybe, to fund public sector pay rises?
And are too many people skiving off for summer? It seems some are enjoying the nice weather more than others, although I think I was a bit rich given the tan I'm currently rocking at the moment. But anyway, one location apparently comes out on top. Can you guess where in the country is the skiving capital of Britain? You're right there.
I was going to call Patrick a skiver there, but he's not, is he?
I was on holiday with you, so that would have been difficult.
Yeah, some of us are blessed with a better ability to tan than others, but you know, I did all right.
I'm half Greek.
But yes, very serious news day today, of course. Yeah. Moving
back at it,
as so we've got a big hour this hour. We're going to talk to Miriam Cates, actually, the former Conservative MP. We're going to ask her about all this talk about cracking down on social media. We know Elon Musk, the billionaire owner of the social media platform X, formerly Twitter, has been mouthing off. I mean, he's pretty much been goading Keir Starmer, calling him two-tier Keir. Lots of people talking about incitement online for these violent protests. How could the government go about sanctioning social media? Should they? Or is that a slippery slope to authoritarianism?
Yeah, I mean, that's a massive problem, right? And I am concerned about how quick a lot of our politicians are to say we need to just shut this down and ban it. Shut it down and ban it. I think that's a big concern for everybody. We're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about the potential for two-tier policing. I mean, we have 2 radically different clips, don't we? One from Mark Rowley, who's the head of the Met, saying it's nonsense, and another one from a chap in the West Midlands appearing to confirm it exists. Well, sorry, which is it then? You know, I think that's an absolute shocker. There's also, it comes off the bat, doesn't it, as well? We're going to be talking a lot now about whether or not Labour is just tone deaf, all right? So, yeah, are they putting their fingers in their ears and ignoring the justified concerns of a lot of people, not talking about people who are going burning down migrant hotels or anything, but the justified concerns of a lot of ordinary people in this country? You look at 2 policies that are doing the rounds today. One, which would essentially scatter asylum seekers across the country. The other one would be to allow violent criminals and terrorists to have a place on the social housing waiting list. Is that really bad timing for Labour?
Well, get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But shall we catch up on the headlines with Sam Francis?
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2 o'clock, and a recap then of the top stories of the day. Police say they are now aware of more than 100 protests and 30 counter-demonstrations planned for this evening. A list of immigration law firms has been shared in online chat groups as possible targets for gatherings, with a message inviting people to mask up and show up. However, police are urging people to ignore the list of locations, telling rioters officers will be waiting. Speaking yesterday after another emergency Cobra meeting, Sir Keir Starmer warned that those involved in violence will be dealt with within a week of arrest.
I made it very clear on a number of occasions that those involved will feel the full force of the law. So we coordinated, we went through some of the numbers. Over 400 people now have been arrested, 100 have been charged, some in relation to online activity, and a number of them are already in court. And I'm now expecting substantive sentencing before the end of this week.
However, speaking to us here on GB News last night, the former Home Secretary Priti Patel called for the Labour government to be more accountable.
This is why we have to have the questions, the scrutiny to the Home Secretary and to Keir Starmer, because actually the police need to have the tools, the equipment, the backing to police in the right way across all protests. Doesn't matter who, but literally all the protests where we're seeing thuggery, violence, criminality. Everyone that's involved in that, these protests should be policed. I've seen footage on television, I'm sure you have as well. I saw some on social media last night from one part of the country where I saw no police. I want to know why that was. Why was there no police presence?
Meanwhile, the first 3 rioters have now been jailed for violent disorder following those nationwide unrests after their sentencing was fast-tracked today. Derek Drummond, who's 58, was ordered to spend 3 years behind bars. That's after he admitted to what he described himself as appalling behaviour in court. Liam Riley from Kirkdale and Declan Gearan from Liverpool were also sentenced to 20 months and 2.5 years, respectively. And it comes as the Metropolitan Police Commissioners dismissed accusations of two-tier policing. He's called that complete nonsense. The criticism came from figures including Nigel Farage and Elon Musk, who argued that last week's disorder was handled more severely than it would have been if ethnic minorities were involved. So Mark Rowley's been addressing those claims.
It's complete nonsense. We have commentators from either end of the political spectrum who like to throw accusations of bias at the police, because we stand in the middle, we operate independently under the law without fear or favour.
Turning to other news now, and Shamima Begum has lost her final bid to challenge the removal of her British citizenship at the Supreme Court this afternoon. She'd originally had her passport removed after joining so-called Islamic State as a teenager in 2015. A judge today, though, has ruled she can't bring the case to court again, suggesting it could be argued the 24-year-old has been the author of her own misfortune. In the US, Kamala Harris says that Tim Walz is the vice president America deserves. That's after officially unveiling him as her running mate at a campaign rally. The Democratic presidential nominee says she chose the Minnesota governor because he's a fighter for the middle class and called him a patriot. Well, the former teacher is considered a more progressive choice with voters. Back here at home, children in England will need to be seen by a GP and a mental health specialist or paediatrician before being referred for gender care. The NHS says the system has to be transformed after a major review found young people were being let down by a lack of research on medical interventions. Freedom of information requests have revealed the youngest child on the national waiting list is under 5 years old. Fujitsu bosses have for the first time come face-to-face with former sub-postmasters affected by the post office scandal. Hundreds of people were wrongfully convicted of fraud after the IT system presented false errors in their accounts. And Fujitsu, the Japanese company, is now under pressure to pay compensation to them. A software provider has provisionally been fined just over £6 million for a ransomware attack that disrupted NHS services in 2022. The Information Commissioner's Office found that Advanced Computer Software Group failed to implement measures to protect the personal information of more than 80,000 people. And that attack led to the disruption of critical services, and data taken included phone numbers and medical records. One last story for you, and it's sport. Team GB are hunting for their 1,000th Olympic medal today in the history of the Games, and it could come in either the athletics, the cycling or in the sailing. Great Britain added 4 medals to their collection in Paris last night. Josh Kerr won silver in the 1,500 metres, and there were also podium finishes in track cycling, skateboarding and in boxing too. Those are your latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sam Francis. Your next update just after 2:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, welcome back to the final hour of Good Afternoon Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2. It's going to be a big hour, this, OK? So 6,000 police officers are on standby at the moment. The nation is bracing now for more than 100 protests today. Bear in mind that we were told it could be about 30 before, so they've upped this, counter-protest as well. This comes as more than 400 people have been arrested so far by the Met Police. And the Met Police have vowed to use every power, tactic and tool in their book to protect the country.
Yes, and in the past hour, 3 men have been jailed for their part in the Southport riots after their sentencing was fast-tracked by the Prime Minister. The Crown Prosecution Service is warning that that is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, earlier this morning, the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, he addressed accusations of two-tier policing.
It's complete nonsense. We have commentators from either end of the political spectrum who like to throw accusations of bias at the police because we stand in the middle, we operate independently under the law without fear or favour.
OK, so that has proved to be deeply controversial, mainly because he appears to have been completely contradicted by another police officer who's in the West Midlands, who was indicating that before the protest that took place in Birmingham, the police met with community elders, unelected, we don't know who they are, you know, who basically dictated to them how they wanted that particular protest, which did see people with weapons driving illegally and culminating in a very violent incident outside a pub, by the way, dictating to the police how they thought that should be policed, which I think many people find odd and concerning. But there's a political aspect behind all this policing, and here to talk about it now is GB News' political editor. It's Christopher Hope. Christopher, thank you very, very much. Yvette Cooper coming under the cosh, quite a lot here. People saying you're not taking any scrutiny from Parliament, you're not necessarily even talking to police officers. Nick Ferrari really nailed her on that on LBC the other day. You know, how are our politicians getting on dealing with this, our new government?
Well, hi, hello both. Yeah, I mean, it is a huge test for this new government. They've been there for 1 month. Yvette Cooper, of course, was a cabinet minister in the previous Labour government back in the noughties. But many people around the new administration are finding this out for the first time, how hard it is to be in government. So let's give them that opportunity to say, well, you know, that is a challenge, and this is a challenge which would have rocked Rishi Sunak's government had he delayed his election until November. It's a huge challenge, I think. The issue of two-tier policing, we saw that idea of two-tier Kia trending on Twitter, on X yesterday. It was promulgated not least by the owner of Twitter, Elon Musk. The issue there is we heard from Robert Jenrick, who's challenging to be Tory leader, that maybe the favourite to be Tory leader. He is saying that it's important that politicians call out violence from white, black, Asian communities, not just focus on, say, it's a far-right issue, recognise it's all groups fighting in different parts of the country. And it's that squeamishness, I think, about calling out all groups is where the politicians are failing and falling down, and that's part of the problem. On the issue of two-tier policing, we heard from an officer last night on Nigel Farrell's programme. He was saying if you step in and arrest, you remove 2 officers from the front line and it can jeopardise the safe policing of the events. That's why you see some arrests going in, some not going in, and that's why Mark Rowley is upset. But you can see, I don't think that is answering what people are seeing on their social media. They're seeing it happen. It needs to be better explained, I think, by the police and by their political masters.
Now, we're hoping that, obviously, people don't get involved in violent disorder tonight, but of course it is very much a real possibility that it will happen. And the government have 6,000, they're saying, sort of riot police ready, or at least police officers ready to try and prevent any of that outbreak of violence. But how much is this stressing resources? We're hearing that the police are having to be called out of any annual leave, and yet Parliament isn't sitting. So police officers, you're not allowed to go on your sunny holiday. You have to say, sorry, family, I can't come with you this time. But the Parliament is just there.
So the government would say, they have said that to us, that there's no point in Parliament returning if you want to create new laws. All the powers they have are there. They've got all the powers they had needed in 2011. They can use those when they sit magistrates around the clock if they want to in order to pass out immediate summary justice. If Parliament returned, there'd be a talking shop. It may take the heat out of the debate, allow MPs from all communities to quiz Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, about what on earth is going on here. So I suppose that might take some of the tension out of it. So we're not always discussing it without any kind of government input on GBNews, for example. That could be part of it. There's also a big cost, by the way. We have to pay for them all coming back to Parliament, and getting Parliament going when it isn't meant to be is costly. I mean, maybe £100,000 or so. So there's all these elements. Why pull them back now is the point.
OK, yeah, I think some people might have concerns about, well, you know, are you avoiding scrutiny there, etc. Can I just mention a story to you that has happened really in the last few hours, but it's gathering steam now, all right? So this is about Robert Jenrick. So Robert Jenrick, who is running to be the next Tory leader. He's actually currently, for in a lot of people's books, the favourite, OK? So he was on Sky News earlier on, and he basically said, in a conversation about riots and protests and law and order and all of this, that people who shout Allahu Akbar should be arrested immediately by police. Now, I have seen the clip of this. I'll be honest with you, for me, it's quite clear what he's referencing. In my view, it's quite clear what he's referencing. He's referencing, you know, quite threatening behaviour. It's context. So threatening aspects of that behaviour. You know, one would imagine it being shouted shortly before a terrorist attack, or when you see things that go on, you know, where you have, you know, kind of groups of people, gangs of people shouting in an intimidating way, balaclavas, knives, whatever. That was what I took from it. There has been some pushback on this, though, hasn't there, Christopher?
Yes, I think you said we heard from the Muslim Council of Britain about it. We've heard other people saying that Muslims say this when they're praying, you know, in a place where you are prayerful. I don't think that's what Robert Jenrick's saying. He's not saying you can't say God is great, which is what those words mean, when you're praying. He's saying it's a context issue. So if there's a gang of youths chanting that and running towards you with weapons, that clearly is an inflammatory thing. So that's what he's worrying about, clearly. I mean, Robert Jenrick is interesting. He is trying to, of the 6 candidates to be the next Tory leader, he is the one who's, I think, going furthest in trying to answer the question of, is it all the far right, or is it a bigger issue? What is happening here? And he's trying to address some of the concerns I think we're seeing from GBNews viewers and listeners about this, that it's not, you can't just say anyone who's concerned about immigration is far right. He's saying it's a wider concern. He takes it on the chin. He was immigration minister. He resigned over the Rwanda scheme under Rishi Sunak. He said yesterday that we must show no squeamishness or selectivity. All this violence must be called out. And I think he's trying to... And his criticism of that is not the police, but other politicians. And that is interesting.
It is interesting. It is interesting. And it's going to be very interesting to see how he and his team handle this, because, you know, predictably, they're under the cosh over this now, right? And we'll see what happens.
Massively so. As is the way. People aren't very generous in their interpretations of what politicians say, or anyone else, anyway. But thank you, Christopher Hope, our political editor. Thank you. Now, another element of all this is Elon Musk, because he's been very, very vocal on X, previously Twitter, about all these riots that are going on across the UK. It comes also at the same time as the Prime Minister. He's saying he wants social media companies to have responsibility to stop disinformation online spreading on their platforms. So we're now joined by former Conservative MP Miriam Cates. Miriam, we've also heard a lot of this from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. She's talking about how social media companies must be responsible for shocking misinformation that has escalated the riots. She's talking about deliberate organisation of violence on social media. I mean, what could the government actually do here?
Good afternoon. Well, that's a very good question. And the root of this problem is that when social media was invented, when it started to become ubiquitous, the United States decided that social media companies were not publishers, they were platforms. And as your viewers will know, publishers have huge responsibilities in terms of making sure that all the material in their newspaper or on their website is truthful. So the Daily Telegraph, the Times, won't print anything unless they can be absolutely sure that it's accurate, that they could defend it in court. Now, of course, social media companies, it was argued at the time, ought to be publishers, but they won that battle in court in the US, and they're not publishers, they're platforms. So they take almost no responsibility for what individuals write on their platforms. Now, if it's Mr. Joe Bloggs who's got 5 followers and posts pictures of his cats, who cares? But when it's somebody who's got millions and millions of followers, is hugely influential, has international reach, it matters what they say. So this is the difficult dilemma that the government has got, because if you take the angle of looking at disinformation, who gets to decide what's disinformation?
Yes.
And I think many of your viewers would be very worried about that. But on the other hand, can we, in democracies, allow a situation where unelected people have huge influence, sometimes completely anonymously, that can lead to the kind of unrest and violence we have on the streets? A very difficult dilemma.
It is a difficult dilemma. There's a couple of points that I'd like to make on this. Sir David Amess, sadly, when he was killed, right, he was killed in a terrorist act, right? It was Islamism. Very quickly, the conversation there, unbelievably, shifted to being a problem with social media. I thought, well, hang on a minute, that to me didn't cut right to the core of what the real issue
How we talk to each other,
was there. The other aspects...
The two are connected. Sorry.
No, well, I'll just say the other aspects of this mirror. The other aspects of this mirror was, you know, when we've seen some news outlets being very reluctant to call out some of the aspects that we can see on the streets taking place at the moment, Birmingham being a good example. The Guardian and the BBC, for a large part of their output, decided to ignore what was really going on there. And it was only really on social media, on X, that you could see what was happening. So, Miriam, is there not a really strong case to say that whilst there might be some disinformation on there and there might be some worrying stuff, actually, in the round, it is a good source of information?
I certainly think that we shouldn't be going for any form of censorship or classification of misinformation. I completely agree, because the dangers are so obvious. We saw what happened in COVID when governments tried to crack down on things that turned out in the long run to be true. But there does have to be some sort of change, because I think even on social media, we say, oh, we can actually see what happened. But actually, if you just see a 30-second clip that someone with already a prejudiced point of view is posting, how can you be sure that that's the full truth? It's like the video we saw at Manchester Airport a couple of weeks ago. We only saw the last part of a policeman attacking somebody. We didn't see the beginning of the fight. And of course, the context is everything. You don't see the context on social media. You might see a broader point of view, but not necessarily a deeper. And this is why I think we need to start asking questions about anonymity, not what you can say, but whether you should take responsibility for what you say, so that if you do something illegal, if you do incite violence, if you do incite racism, you can at least be held accountable. But just back to your
Miriam, there are
point.
so many problems with that too. What if you're working in a public service and you're not allowed to have opinions? What if you're a dissident from a horrible, nasty regime and it's the only way you can get truths out there? You know, a lot of people are protected by their anonymity as much as there are wrong-uns who use it.
I think they are fair points, but I think there are two things we need to consider here. First of all, I think a lot of us have forgotten that a free world, a democratic world did exist before social media. And we only have to go back 20 years ago. You know, I was an adult. When I became an adult, there was no social media. And we had free speech and we had democracy.
I remember that world, Miriam.
You won't. I'm a lot older than you. So the democratic free world does not depend on social media. It's actually the other way around. And the second point is that, yes, I do understand that people want to express themselves anonymously, and that, that's very understandable. But how much do anonymous accounts achieve compared to people who are actually willing to be named? Now, that's risky, but actually you don't achieve much unless you are willing to risk. So very difficult debate, not black and white at all. But I do think it can't go on as it is.
Is it not actually a bit easy to blame social media and to say, this has all happened now? This has all happened because someone that we don't like posted something and it whipped people up, as opposed to actually addressing the harder issue for our politicians to address, which is the root cause of a lot of people's concerns. You know, look, something else will pop up. People start sending messages by homing pigeon, and it looks a bit authoritarian. It looks a bit authoritarian. I also wonder if it makes people seem like other people are a bit thick, that they can't watch something and still form their own opinion on it. Is it not just easier now for politicians to blame social media as opposed to dealing with the problems that some might think they've created?
I think both things are true at the same time. And I think that's what's being missed here in the debate. Yes, there are deep underlying causes to these riots that have nothing to do with social media. They're about terrible immigration policy. They're about the fact that multiculturalism has failed and people have woken up to that fact. That is absolutely true. There's a separate but equally true fact, which is that social media has completely changed the nature of our debate. I think it's made people less tolerant, more angry, and more willing to form polarised camps, and we have both the message and the medium. So the message is immigration has failed, but the medium of social media is an entirely different medium to a homing pigeon. You can't get millions of people out on the street in 20 minutes with a homing pigeon.
Absolutely right. Miriam, so sorry, we're going to have to cut it there, but we have to be a big pigeon. Miriam Cates, thank you so much, former Conservative MP. Great to talk to you. I mean, there is no denying social media is an absolute cesspit at the moment, and it is whenever there's flash points like this. But yes, if you've enjoyed watching, well, Patrick on your screens this afternoon, you can catch him this evening on Patrick Christie's Tonight at 9 o'clock. There you are.
There you are. That's weird,
That's a nice photo, isn't it?
That's weird. Yeah, there you go. Interesting, if you Google my name, I don't recommend that you do this, for some reason the internet shows you a topless picture of me.
Well, you should put that
of all of the pictures.
It's obviously the most seen, the most watched.
Well, what can I say?
Don't know why.
Right, up next, we're going to talk about energy bills, because it seems like pensioners are facing sky-high increases to their bills when everyone else's bills are going down. Look, for me, to be honest with you, the real question here is, are pensioners being made to pay the price now for whopping great big public sector pay rises? Stay tuned.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
One local cricket team was made up entirely of one family, the Jollens.
The Newmarket midweek seconds played Thurlow and Old Millgreenian seconds, captained by, here we go, James Jolland. He played alongside family members Henry, Freddie, George, Jack, Archie, Ryan, Brandon and Daniel. Even if slightly controversial, one of the umpires was a Jolland to Stephen the umpire.
Yes, well, the Jolland family mostly live in Wickenbrook in Suffolk and have played for 4 years for Dullingham Village team before it merged with Newmarket. So that's the entire backstory. We're delighted to be joined now by Captain James Jolland and teammate and brother Nick Jolland. Really good to see you both this morning. This is incredible. How did you get the entire family involved in cricket?
Well, we started the club about 3 years ago, and it was more friends and family. But then it had this opportunity of this week to get everyone involved, because everyone was back and they all played cricket, various levels, and the youngest being 12, George. And we're all available, so we thought 1 week we'd do the whole team.
You booted the friends out for 1 week only?
Yeah, they were very good about it. They come and watched. They supported us.
How did the other team feel about having an umpire with related ties?
Well, the captain of the Thurlow is one of our friends. We do know him, so he was fine with it, and there was no controversial decisions at all.
I think it's a fantastic strategy.
No, yeah.
You could plant somebody.
That's the way
in a position of authority. It's a great idea.
Oh, look, here's the scorecard we can see on the screen with all of your names on there. Some fantastic English names on there. How does it get between the family members? Is it very, very competitive between you all?
As you get older, you work on that, don't you? And you keep that competitiveness out of it. And it's really to play with your sons. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it's a lovely
We've
thing
all
to
got
do.
sons in it. That's why we do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is, I think, 28 minutes past 2 now. Now, millions of pensioners will face higher energy bills from October. This comes after Labour's decision to scrap universal winter fuel payments this year.
Yes, however, while pensioners face an increase of about 15% now, everyone else is going to see their energy bills fall because of this price cap. Well, under the price cap.
Yeah, indeed. This is a big issue. It raises serious questions. You know, are pensioners being scapegoated here? You know, in order to pay for things like whopping great big public sector pay rises? You know, what's happening? We're joined now by Simon Francis, the coordinator of the End Fuel Poverty Coalition campaign group. Thank you very, very much. This is a bit of a shocker, this, isn't it? I mean, you know, pensioners now missing out and, you know, that money being diverted elsewhere, potentially.
Yeah, it's absolutely really concerning for those pensioners who basically are going to be facing a 15% year-on-year increase in their energy bills. So for most people, year-on-year bills will fall slightly, although they are going up in October compared to the prices that we're paying now. So the rest of the country is still definitely not out of the woods when it comes to energy bills. But for pensioners, they're going to really see a massive difference compared to last year, and that's entirely because the winter fuel payment has been taken off them for the majority of pensioners. And that's been done at really short notice. I think, you know, like if you speak to a lot of people, you know, you talk about should benefits be means tested, should every pensioner have access to this? You know, there's clearly a conversation to be had there. But what's happened is there's been no consultation, there's been no conversation. The benefit has been taken away at very short notice. Pensioners will have no time to plan to find the extra £300. And unfortunately, what that's going to mean is that unless the government steps in with more support, we're going to see 2 million more pensioners enter fuel poverty. Another 3 million pensioners suffer financially hardship because of this decision. And we're really urging the Chancellor to think again.
I mean, Simon, that is a brilliant point you make, that this has happened so quickly and without consultation, and that perhaps the government aren't truly aware of just how many people this will impact. And as you say, there could be the possibility that many, many pensioners are pushed into fuel poverty this winter, which is very worrying indeed. I guess there is an argument, though, to be very realistic about this, that we can't really have universal welfare payments for any kind of benefit. Surely everything must be means tested in this day and age.
Well, I think if the government had sat down with charities and had a conversation about that and looked at what other support could be put in place. So, for instance, if there was more support to help end energy debt, if there was an extension to the household support fund, if there are perhaps changes to the warm home discount, then maybe some form of means testing of the winter fuel payment could be justified. But at the moment, just taking it away and not replacing it with anything else is going to leave pensioners in a very difficult position. And the health risks of being in cold, damp homes, which is ultimately what this will cause, is going to force people to the doors of the NHS.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think this is an absolute shocker. Look, Simon, thank you very much. And, you know, I hope to talk to you about this again at some point, again, very soon. Simon Francis, the coordinator of the End Fuel Poverty Coalition campaign group. Can I just say this is a question of fairness, right? You've got people here who are, by definition, elderly or getting towards being elderly anyway, who have paid into the system their entire lives, done their bit, probably worked hard, got to retirement, and now they're being clobbered. And you have to ask, well, we've got money for a lot of other things, haven't we? We're about to see a whopping great big public sector pay rises, aren't we?
The counter to that is that working people are being taxed more than, you know, they've been in decades and decades and decades. Where is all this money going to come from? Surely means testing is the way forward for all of these things. You know, benefits for working people, benefits for everyone. You know, the money, there is no magic money tree. But I think that point about how this has been brought in with no consultation and very, very quickly, come into government in July, this is taken away by October. I mean, that is very quick.
There's a magic money tree for certain people, though, it seems.
That is true. That is true. But shall we get the headlines quickly? We'll be back in a tick.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2:30. The top story from the newsroom this hour. Police are now aware of more than 100 protests planned across England and Wales tonight, with just two forces saying they don't expect to see anything in their area. A list of immigration law firms has been shared in online chat groups as possible targets for gatherings, with a message inviting people to mask up and to show up. However, police are urging people to ignore that list of locations, telling rioters that officers will be waiting for them. And it comes as the first Crown Court sentences have been handed down to some rioters involved in the disorder over the past week, including a man who assaulted an officer. Meanwhile, a coroner says it's impossible to articulate the lifelong effects of the stabbing attack in Southport now over a week ago. Inquests into the death of 6-year-old Bebe King, Alice da Silva Aguirre, who was 9, and 7-year-old Elsie Dot Stankham have opened and adjourned. 17-year-old Axel Radakubana will stand trial next year after being charged with 3 counts of murder and 10 of attempted murder. Shamima Begum has lost her final bid to challenge the removal of her British citizenship. The 24-year-old, who was found in a Syrian refugee camp after travelling there as a teenager in 2015, lost her initial appeal last year on national security grounds. This latest ruling today at the Supreme Court confirms she can't appeal any further. Fujitsu is holding its first ever meeting with a group of post office sub-postmasters this morning. Hundreds of branch managers were wrongly convicted of fraud because of faults in its Horizon IT system. The Japanese company is now under pressure to pay compensation. A software firm has been told that it faces a £6 million fine for failing to prevent a cyber attack that disrupted NHS services. The data watchdog says the Advanced Computer Software Group didn't protect the personal information of more than 80,000 people in 2022, which was held ransom. And Team GB are hoping for more success later at the Paris Games after last night adding 4 medals to the haul. This comes after Josh Kerr won silver in the 1,500 metres, and there were also podium finishes in track cycling, in skateboarding and in boxing. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sam Francis. Sophia Wensler will have your next update just after 3 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Quite a lot of cloud around today, but some sunny spells. A fair few showers, mostly in the west, and a cool breeze, and quite windy actually across northwestern areas. Thanks to this area of low pressure, bringing plenty of showers. Been a wet start today across western Scotland. The rain will be a bit more sporadic this afternoon, more on and off, and there will be some brighter spells, but plenty of showers packing in across Scotland, through northern England, Wales and into the Midlands. Much of the east will stay dry, but we'll see a bit more cloud coming in here through the afternoon. Some sunny spells for Northern Ireland and Wales during the middle part of the afternoon. It's a cooler feel, particularly in the east. Temperatures close to average, actually. Low 20s across the south. In the high teens further north. And feeling cooler because of the gusty wind and the showers, which will continue to drift in on that gusty wind over the Highlands and the Western Isles well into this evening. The showers should ease across northeastern parts of Scotland, so some sunny spells here. And not too many showers to end the day for Northern Ireland and Northern England as well. So decent chance here that it will be quite dry. There's that cloudier zone working in through the day over the Midlands and eastern areas, and further south and west brightening up for a time, but here then later on more cloud will start to move in through the evening, and particularly overnight, bringing rain and drizzle by the time we get to tomorrow morning. Elsewhere, many places will become dry through the nights. The winds will ease a little across northwest Scotland, but still quite a breezy night, and temperatures dropping down to 13 or 14 for England and Wales, 11 or 12 across central and northern Scotland. Tomorrow's going to be a pretty drab day for Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland. Lots of cloud, rain and drizzle, and that rain and drizzle will gradually spread into southern Scotland, eventually over northern England and eventually into the east as well, though again many places here will stay dry. Temperatures are generally still up into the 20s, feeling quite warm and quite humid though for much of tomorrow.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, the westbound M62 in West Yorkshire. Now, the exit slip to the M1 southbound. This is junction 29's closed off. There's emergency repairs ongoing. It's queuing back to Rothwell at junction 30. You can still join the M1 southbound from the interchange, though. Northbound M1 slow in the roadworks just after Flitwick at junction 12. Not helped by an earlier breakdown. All lanes open, but still slow back to 11A at Luton North. Now, the entry slip clockwise M25 still shut at Brentwood 28, queuing back towards Mount Nessing on the Brentwood bypass, the A12, for emergency repairs. And the M4 westbound, just away from Bristol, towards the M48 at 21, all the traffic being held there. There's a vehicle fire, naturally causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Right, it's 2:38. It's time to talk about what's coming up, and it is Nana who's up next, covering for Martin Domney. Nana Akwe, what is coming up on your show this afternoon?
Well, I tell you what, I won't go on holiday again. I literally left, and you two as well. You can't go away because what's happened literally the moment we left. But look, I was watching this. I went to Portugal. I've been watching this from abroad. The whole thing has been unfolding. And obviously today we will be looking at some of the sentencing because 3 people have been sentenced. Some are saying not harshly enough. If you compare their sentences to those with Just Stop Oil, who got 5 years, and these others have at least less than half of that. But also looking at what may unfold tonight. Now, we hear potentially over 100 supposed far-right protests, and then another 30 counter-protests. It's going to be a very busy show tonight. We'll be speaking to Christopher Hope, getting all the latest, finding out, getting updates on the whole situation, and just basically informing the British public on both sides of this continual writing.
Yeah, no, look, thank you very much for that. It's going to be, you know, a fantastic show. There's so much news about today. And, you know, the sense really, isn't there, that, you know, stuff is really happening in Britain. We hope it doesn't kick off tonight, but, I mean, literally all of our political class and all of our police force are saying that they think it will. And it's something to keep an eye on, isn't it? So thank you very much for that, Nana. I know we'll all be watching here back at base. So it's Nana Akwe there.
Absolutely, we will. Now, according to reports, Labour is planning to stop using large military sites for housing asylum seekers. Their plan is instead to disperse asylum seekers across the country, this with the aim to ease local service pressures.
Yeah, I mean, just to think as well, before the news, we were talking about the idea that you know, pensioners are now going to have their energy bills massively increased. There's not going to be the payments for them. They're not going to get the help they need. And, you know, you can't help but contrast that, I think, with what we're seeing here. The government has agreed with local councils now on how many asylum seekers each area will take. It's still going to move them out of things like the big RAF bases that we've seen, Wethersfield, Scampton. So reports suggest that they're also planning on using empty homes, former student blocks, self-catering facilities as well, buying up various different properties. So, yeah.
Yeah, but before we go to our guest on this, please do get in touch at gbnews.com/your say, because it's all a bit difficult, isn't it? Because if you're not going to use hotels, if you're not going to use RAF bases, if you're not going to use barge, well, it makes sense then that you're going to have to find housing somewhere.
Well, one of the problems is, though, so Labour's stopped Rwanda. They have also closed the Bibby Stockholm. Well, so that's Dorset Council. So now Dorset Council, as part of this potential agreement to take essentially a quota of asylum seekers, are apparently saying that they might have to use a hotel. So you're getting the cost, you're getting the same cost, you're getting more people, there's no deterrent. There is also, you know, the very genuine concern for people who are especially in slightly more isolated areas where there is not a ready supply of social housing or cheap, affordable rental accommodation, especially for people who may be leaving university, going back home, getting their first job, need somewhere to live. You know, is there going to be a perception, at least, that other people will be prioritised.
And we keep being told, don't we, how many people in their 30s are still living with mum and dad.
Well, get used to it.
You know, not with this accommodation. I mean, unless they really do just kick on and build so much housing, otherwise it's going to push up rents, is it not? Joining us now to discuss this is former Royal Navy Commander Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry. What do you make of this plan from the new Labour government then? Scrapping the use of military bases, scrapping the use of barge, hopefully scrapping the use of hotels, but instead sort of agreeing with local councils to take their fair share?
Well, I think the migration dam has burst, hasn't it? They can't actually contain it anymore. And what they're doing is abdicating responsibility for what is a national crisis down to council level. And the inevitable consequence of that is we're going to have increased pressure on already pressurised services relating to health, to crime prevention and education. And I'm just wondering how many resources are going to be devolved down from central level to actually pay for all this. Because I'm afraid to say, given Labour's current trajectory, they're going to be loading local community charge payers for this. It's going to be local people having to pay for this. And I think you're going to see even more dissent, disquiet as a result of what is a very ill thought through policy.
Yeah, it's taxpayer. This is it, isn't it? And there is, I'm sorry to say it, there is a link between some of the community frustrations, not all of them, I'm not trying to excuse any of the actual criminality or anything, a link between just genuine fears and frustrations of people and the idea of literally this, having to pay for, you know, asylum seekers in your local area or people we don't know necessarily where they have come from or what their past is. Actually, maybe them being given permanent residence there above other people in that housing queue. I mean, that is literally the problem in a nutshell here. There's also a story that I actually broke last night. It was an exclusive on my show last night. Yarlswood Immigration Removal Centre is going to see its capacity jump from 410 to 3,000. The government has got a contract out for tender on that. The implication here, by the way, Chris, is that this will take potentially 12 years to actually come to fruition. The implication here is that Labour is potentially admitting that they might accept the Channel migrant crisis for another 12 years as well. Do you see that going on?
Well, it's been going on for 16 years already, so I don't see why it shouldn't go on for another 12. The European Union has been trying to put together an external borders policy for 36 years. We still don't have one of those. I'm afraid people are failing to grip this. You know, I've seen lots of really good plans to deal with this crisis, but there isn't the political will or courage within our Houses of Parliament to actually deal with it. I think the other worry that most people have got in dispersing people who, frankly, are undocumented and also so unidentifiable into our local communities is, you know, how many people we're going to get in our vicinity we don't know their backgrounds. Are we going to find that everybody's got a mental health issue every time they commit a crime, for example? You know, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when we dispersed mental health patients into care in the community. It was absolute chaos initially, and we had lots of people on the streets. We had people roaming about the streets with very odd behaviour. I don't think it's been thought through. There'll be a lot of unintended consequences here, and I'm afraid it's typical of what we've seen in the first month of this government. Lots of knee-jerk reactions, trying to do too much too early. I'm afraid to say, failing the British public.
It does feel that way, and I think, you know, just average Brits are just fed up of seeing their taxpayer money go towards government failure. I mean, how many times have the government said they're going to crack down on illegal migration? How many times have they said we're going to reduce legal immigration? And it just doesn't happen. And then who is it that has to cough up for all of it? It's just average Britons who don't have that much money themselves.
Who's got you know, my 87-year-old grandma's fuel bills are going up this winter, and you simultaneously got the money for this kind of stuff. I think that raises serious
Well, thank you very much, Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, former Royal Navy Commander. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to finally, after the break, reveal the capital for skivers in this country. And a clue, it's not actually Westminster. Stay tuned.
Hey, there we go.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Fatima's UK campaign.
children and young people matter. Because I actually run a campaign, and my ministry today is about looking after children in the care system and improving their life outcomes. You know, for me, I had a difficult start to my childhood, and I will never forget it. I mean, I always say I may have left the care system, but the care system hasn't left me. And I instantly understand the importance of giving our young children and young people the opportunity to also, you know, have good life outcomes. So Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. And it's a summit next year. Eamon, I hope you're going to come.
No, and we've talked about this before, and certainly, I mean, I believe in what you're doing. I think it's marvellous what you're doing, and that's why, you know, when you think about children, and children are so close to you, and you look at that horror that happened in Southport yesterday, I mean, things like that
exactly.
will really hit home hard.
Well, children are the innocent ones, aren't they, Eamon? And this is what we look at when you think they're the future. We've got to start to put them back at the top. And it's a travesty when we see things like that, you know, that happen. You know, children are the ones that are impacted. And, you know, it's, for me, you know, it's really important to be able to do the best we can and looking after their future. And so hopefully, you know, I'm going to the Pyrenees in September, Eamon. That's my next challenge, the Bay of Biscay, from France to Spain and back. And hopefully people can go online, fatimascampaign.com, and give generously to help make a difference to these young people's lives. Because, as I say, children are the future.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
All right, so staying motivated whilst working from home can be tough, especially if the sun is shining. And for some, the temptation is just a bit too much.
To pour themselves another Aperol Spritz. But now new data has identified the town where employees are most likely to search for ways to appear busy, while really, they're actually slacking off.
Yeah, so Ray Addison went to Berkshire.
Reading, home to some of the UK's top tech and finance companies. And according to a new study, the country's top skivers too.
So we're like lazy, kind of.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Well, that sounds about right, actually.
Analysis by tech firm QR Code Generator found that remote workers here are most likely to be skiving off this summer, with Google searches for ways to fool virtual productivity monitoring 69% higher than the UK average. Making up the rest of the top 5 are Preston, Wakefield, Cheltenham and Hove.
Could probably look into doing that myself. Sounds like something I'd try.
I didn't even know it existed. No, that's incredibly creative.
It tends to be cases where like management tends to look on them constantly, so they feel like they have to do something.
But I do think that if you're being paid to do a job, then you should be actively doing it, especially if you have the option to work remotely.
James Bohr is a security and technology consultant.
So you can find all sorts of things. People have jury-rigged their own using things like the famous drinking bird, just to hit a key now and then. I've seen people use vibration pads and just put a mouse on it so it jiggles around constantly. Or you can, if you really want to, buy deliberately designed ones. Those are the mechanical devices. Now, there is also software that promises to do this, but a large amount of that software is problematic itself because you don't know who's written it. You don't know if it's going to do something malicious or log your keystrokes so it your password. So the software I'd be very careful with.
Helen Wright runs 9 to 3 jobs and her entire team works from home. She believes firms need to leave employees to get on with it.
I think the pandemic has opened the door to hybrid working. I think candidates out there are now expecting to be able to do it. And for many, many years, for decades, employers have been able to watch their staff in the office. So I think there's a head shift, a mind shift that really needs to happen when it comes to monitoring output. And I think it's really sad if members of staff feel the need to demonstrate that they're working when perhaps they're not.
Now, as I filmed this report, another survey emerged which revealed that 20% of UK home workers admitted using their company laptop to view adult material. Another 39% confessed that they had taken work phone calls while sitting on the loo.
I wouldn't. Well, if you need to go, you need to go, innit? If you've got a meeting, yeah, I would do that. Really?
Absolutely. How many of us use our phones, use our laptop on the toilet anyways? I don't see that as much different.
I don't think it's all that bad. You're at home, but things still need to be done. It's definitely one of the nice things that allow people to work from home.
As the line between work and personal life continues to blur, companies may have to decide how much they trust their employees. And if they feel working from home is no longer productive or safe, we could all end up back in the office. Ray Addison, GB News, Reading.
So there you go, Reading, the sky, the capital. Have you ever taken a work call from the bog?
Yeah, all the time.
Oh,
absolutely, you have to, yeah.
Do you mute yourself at least?
Sometimes not with disastrous consequences. Yeah.
It's pretty grim, isn't it?
Absolutely. But normally that person only calls you once. After you've horrended them, then they need to stop calling.
Well, at least you're not the only person doing it. Half of Reading is.
Exactly. All right, OK. Well, look, up next is Nara Queer, who's in for Martin Daubney. Can I just as well tease ahead to the show that I'll be doing 9 to 11 p.m. tonight?
Oh, all right, then.
Look, we hope it doesn't happen, but also it is looking as though it's shaping up to be an incredibly volatile evening. I'll be bringing that all to you. Stay tuned.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Quite a lot of cloud around as we head into this evening. A few showers, but many places dry. Quite a fresh breeze, though. In fact, really quite windy across northwest Scotland, close to this area of low pressure. These weather fronts will bring cloud and rain for many tomorrow, but actually through this evening we'll see the cloud thickening across South Wales and southwest England. Still a lot of showers in western Scotland, 1 or 2 across northern England this evening, but they're tending to fade away. For many it'll become a dry night with lengthy clear spells across the east. Getting quite windy through the middle of the night, in particular across northern Scotland, but elsewhere the winds will ease down. Temperatures dipping down to single figures in rural parts of Scotland, but generally pretty warm across the south, and the warm and humid air is going to really push in through tomorrow. A dull, damp start for Wales and southwest England. Most of the day here is going to be pretty drab. Something a bit brighter further east, but it will cloud over here through the day. The cloud and rain will trickle into parts of Northern Ireland, the south in particular, and across northwest England. Much of the morning fine and dry across a good part of Scotland. Still a few showers, but not as many as today, and it won't be as windy as today either. In fact, much of the day looking fine across Aberdeenshire. But for southwest Scotland, the rain and drizzle will trickle in here. As I said, dull and damp for most of the day for Wales and southwest England, and outbreaks of rain will spread sporadically across the Midlands, then into northern England. Could turn heavier through the evening as well. Much of East Anglia and the southeast staying dry, just turning cloudy. Here again, temperatures into the low 20s. Generally quite a warm, humid feeling day through much of tomorrow. The rain and drizzle continuing to push northwards, actually pepping up for a time across Scotland as well. So some heavier bursts here during tomorrow evening. Then it turns fresher again for Friday. Some showers on Saturday, and it is likely to hot up again with the humidity on Sunday and Monday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, Buy that treat that always seemed out of reach. Or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We got an incredible story this week of a young teenager who has raised more than £5,000 for charity.
13-year-old, just 13 years old, Cameron Hutchison cycled the West Highland Way with his dad, Colin, in just 25 hours, raising money for international food charity Mary's Meals. And the 96-mile route took Cameron and Colin to the foot of Ben Nevis.
Wow. Now, the organisation provides daily school meals to more than 2.4 million children in countries such as Syria, Haiti and Malawi.
We are delighted to be joined now by cyclist and fundraiser Cameron Hutchison. Cameron, it's so lovely to have you here. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well.
Well, we're very impressed to have you. We are honoured to have you. First of all, do you like cycling?
Yeah, it's one of my favourite sports. So, yeah, I just wanted to do that.
What kind of bike did you do that enormous distance in? Did you have a special bike? Was it adapted?
Well, it was my cross-country bike that I just normally use for cross-country races. So, yeah.
Wow.
You can actually see it on the screen there with the blue handlebars. That's the bike I was using.
We can, and quite a route you went on as well. So, Cameron, you're 13 years old. When did you start cycling?
I've sort of been cycling my whole life. So I got a little red balance bike when I was maybe 3 or 2, maybe. And then I kind of just got bigger bikes as I went on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. Welcome to Martin Daubney's show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. I'm Nana Aquia, standing in for Martin today. And my goodness, I mean, I've been away, and what an incredible few weeks it's been. Very scary. Police are steeled for more than 100 protests across the country this evening. Many firms are boarding up windows to protect them from possible attacks, as the rioting has shamed the UK, shows no sign of dying down. The government have been criticised from all sides for its response to the violence. I'll be speaking to former Home Office Minister to get his take on what Sir Keir Starmer has done. And the first prison sentences for the obs involved in the rioting have been handed out today. One top legal chief has said that many of those involved will be sent to prison for a long time. All of that coming up between now and 6 o'clock. So quite a heavy, quite a busy show. But in other news, do you have a Formica work surface? If you do, there may be implications with lung conditions. Stay tuned to hear all about that. And as ever, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Send me your views, post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. But now it's time to get your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Nana, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Police say they're now aware of more than 100 protests and 30 counter-demonstrations planned for this evening. A list of immigration law firms has been shared in an online chat group as possible targets for gatherings.